Hello and welcome to A Grain of Sanderson, a podcast where we are foolishly attempting to read all of Brandon Sanderson's works in publication order. I am very ill. I am joined by Taylor Lane.
Hello.
And Jack McLaughlin.
Hello. And I have to say, happy Easter, and I think it's pretty appropriate that we're starting this episode with our friend Graham almost being unable to record because of how sick they are, but then rising almost as if from the grave to record anyway.
Rising
It's
from the bathroom
really.
floor.
rising from the bathroom floor.
Christ.
Just as Jesus did. So we've got Alloy of Law today.
Yeah.
The first book in the second installment of the Mistborn trilogy of trilogies, even though this is not a trilogy. It turned out to be 4 books.
It's frequently called Era 2 of Mistborn.
Yeah, now it's a quadrology of trilogies, and one of them is a quadrology.
I'm so surprised that Sanderson, of all authors, promised a small series and then ended up writing something much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like him at all.
This man does not work well with word counts.
He should really get better at that.
Mm-hmm.
So Scadrial has changed
A little bit.
after the events of Hero of Ages. By the way, if you haven't read Mistborn and you're planning to read the Mistborn trilogy, this is probably not the best podcast to start with, because we will be talking about the end of Hero of Ages, because that completely changes the world.
This is 300 years. I guess spoilers start now, so, leave now or forever hold your peace. But this takes place 300 years after Sazed ascended to the role of harmony, taking the shard's ruin and preservation, and remade the world into Edenic utopia asterisk.
Huge asterisk there.
Big asterisk. Big asterisk there. And this is just like 300 years after that. It's like society has progressed. The world is a lot more typical Earth. I think I found in the annotations that that's very intentional. Sanderson is going into Mistborn from now on as like, this is meant to be like, he's not trying to do what he does with Stormlight or some other books. Like, this is the most Earth-like world. Unless otherwise stated, it's basically going to be the same as Earth in terms of how, weather and ecology and life and all that stuff work.
Which is a choice.
That's something we can get into.
Yeah, that'll be our first topic, is talking about like how this book came to be and how he came to write it.
Yeah, let's do our one-sentence summaries. Taylor, what's yours?
My one-sentence summary is, Sanderson's biggest fear is not writing a bad book, it's physics majors.
One of our bullet point topics to get to is Jack gets to flex his physics degree, and I'm really looking forward to it. My one sentence is, Wax has the power of God and guns on his side.
It's true.
He does.
We'll get there. That's also a choice.
I forgot that happened, because remember, I'm rereading this, and I totally forgot that even happened.
I can't believe we're doing fucking hemalurgic earrings again. I can't believe we're doing it again.
No, but this time it's good. But this time it's good.
I know that like God is better this time, but like weird thing to reuse. That could have been my one sentence summary, honestly. My one sentence summary is a toss up between I have never been so excited by the first third of a book and so let down by the remaining 2/3, or Wolverine, it's time to stop doing that now, and I'll get into what that point means. But if you manage to understand what I mean just by that one point, congratulations, you're a big fucking X-Men nerd.
All right. Looking forward to that. I can't say that I'm an X-Men nerd.
The X-Men 97 show is pretty good, and you don't need to be a huge X-Men fan to understand what's going on.
Anyway, do we want to do the summary, which was written graciously written by Taylor, because Graham and I have been
drowning.
For one reason or another, drowning.
Okay, so for the summary, I found no easy way to put this information in, but you should know that Wax is a steel and iron twin-born, and in this world, Mistborns don't exist anymore. You can only have one elementic power and one,
Feruchemical.
Feruchemical power, and twinborns are ones that have one of each. Right. They make a big point of explaining how rare they are, and then all of the characters are pretty much twinborns.
All the important
Don't worry about it. So Wax is a steel and iron twinborn, which means he can push on metals, and then he can also store his weight with his ferochemical power. Wayne is a bandalloy and gold twinborn, which means that he can slow time around his bubbles and heal. In the back of the book, it says he can speed.
No, this sort of matters for what happens. It's inside the bubble, he speeds up time. So inside the bubble, like, he's doing stuff, while outside everything looks like it's standing still. He basically goes into a little bubble of sped up time.
And Marassi is the opposite. She's a cadmium allomancer, which means on the outside of her bubble, time is sped up very fast.
And she's slowing it down dramatically around her.
Again, this is what I'm saying. Sanderson does not care about writing a good book. He cares about not pissing off the physics majors. Like, I do not care about all this stuff. I do not.
We'll get there.
In the first installment of the Era 2 Mistborn series, The Alloy of Law, Waxilium teams up with Wayne and Marassi to solve the crime of the mysterious railroad thieves called the Vanishers, headed by an old colleague, Miles Hundredlives. The prologue begins with Wax killing his wife, Lessie, while hunting down a local criminal, Bloody Tan. While Tan had Lessie captured, Wax went to shoot Tan, but instead, Tan lurched Lessie's head back so that the bullet hit her instead. Called back to Ellendale from tragedy of the sudden death of his uncle and sister, along with the loss of ties to the Ruffs from losing his wife, Waxilium tries high society life for a while, putting away his old guns in a trunk and giving them to his butler. In trying to secure a marriage for his house, Wax meets Steris and Marassi. Steris is straightforward and sees marriage as simply a contract. Marassi is revealed to be a student of the law and is a bit of a fangirl of Wax and Wayne. At a wedding dinner, the Vanishers show up. This mysterious group of criminals is known for making the entire contents of a train car vanish in moments. Along with full train cars, they also moved on to passenger cars, always kidnapping a woman. Recently, the Vanishers had targeted locations other than trains, like a playhouse. As chance would have it, the Vanishers show up to rob this wedding dinner and go to kidnap Steris and Marassi. Wax and Wayne step up to the challenge of the fight, ultimately saving Marassi, but failing to get Steris back. The next day, Marassi shows up to Wax's estate, where he has worked through the case all night. Wax determines that the kidnapped women are all chosen because they were allomancers, and Marassi helps discover that they might want to breed an allomancer army or make new allomancers. Wayne then shows up with new information about the Vanishers' hideout. Mid-cracking the case, however, Wax's butler betrays Wax by trying to poison, then shoot, then ultimately blow up the three of them. Using their combined powers, they make it out of the explosion mostly unscathed. With Wayne's tip, the three go to investigate the Vanishers' old hideout. By asking a nearby beggar, Wax determines that the Vanishers were transporting something large through the canals. The three of them take a train ride out to the country to confirm Wax's theory, and Wax guesses he's probably correct. However, on the way back to Ellendale, Miles reveals his hand, starting a shootout with Wax on the train. Miles claims he has turned to crime because being a lawman never actually helped the systemic issue of crime, and in his powerlessness decided to turn to his interpretation of true law against the nobility. Miles is a gold twin-born savant, meaning that he can heal extremely fast and from anything, including a direct shot to the face, making this fight basically impossible to win. At the end of the fight, Wax escapes Miles by pushing him off the train with a clever allomantic shove. Needing a place to hide for a few hours, Wax, Wayne, and Marassi visit Renette, an extremely clever gunsmith. Renette gives Wax a place to write his new theories, and a new allomancer-specific gun named Vindication. In these few hours, Wax realizes when and where Miles is going to hit his next target that night. With some clever maneuvering, Wax shuts himself into Miles' targeted payload and allows the thievery to go off without a hitch, bringing Wax directly into the lair of the Vanishers. In the end, Wax crushes an entire building on the Vanishers using his allomancy, saves Steris, and with the help of Marassi, tricks Miles into not noticing Marassi's speed time bubble, pushing time forward rapidly so that when it drops, the cops have completely surrounded Miles, and he gets taken into custody. The constables thank Wax for his catch by granting him the powers of investigation and arrest, allowing him to continue what he does while within the parameters of the law. In the epilogue, Miles is executed, and after which, Marassi has a chance encounter with Marsh, or Iron Eyes as he's known now, where he gives her a booklet of information to give to Wax. On the other hand, Wax confronts his uncle, whom which he realized was the secret backer of the Vanishers the whole time, Mr. Suit, and was not in fact dead. With the immediate case cracked, but still all the women taken as hostages not yet found, our heroes still have their work cut out for them.
All of that is things that happened in the book, and that summary is somehow more interesting than the book, unfortunately.
I know. There was times of this summary where I was writing it and I was just like, God. And then they go to the hideout, and then they go to the train, and then they go here, and then they do this. Like, and Wax is right, and Wax is right, and Wax is right, and Wax is right. I'm like, okay.
Something else I only really thought of listening to your summary was such a huge deal is made out about how dangerous and unstoppable Miles 100 Lives is, when ultimately all they needed to do to stop him was bring more than 2 people. was literally just out. Because just to be clear, listeners, Miles 100 Lives, he has they explain compounding at the end of the Mistborn book. All you really got to know is that if you're a twin-born and you have like the same metal, like your gold allomancy and gold fear-chemy, you can basically supercharge the fear-chemy part. So gold allomancy or gold fear-chemy is healing, and since he also has gold allomancy, he does he's Wolverine healing. He heals from anything. There's a time where he like sets off dynamite in his hand to like escape from a net, and it just like is fine.
Right.
But he's not like super strong, super fast. He's not even particularly skilled like a fighter.
No.
He just can't die. The way they beat him is they just surround him with a couple dozen cops who can then just like tackle him and hold him down, and he's lost now. Like, so the whole time there's this big deal about how like Wax and Wayne need to do it alone and that stuff, when it's just like, bring backup, dear God. Have more people.
And again, like, reading this description, it's like, oh, all this shit happens. This is so exciting. And then, like, in the book itself, it's not nearly as exciting. Like, I would say everything after the wedding dinner is kind of sauceless, unfortunately.
Which is interesting. Well, we'll get into how the book was made. One of the stories for how this book was made was that it was originally supposed to be a short story, and that wedding scene was the climax of that short story, was like the end of that short story.
I believe that.
I also believe that. You know why? Because I have a guess that this was a super polished first draft that he just published. No revision, like he just really polished up this first draft and didn't give a fuck about revising it or making a second draft. He just threw that shit out there because I guess, honestly, I think Sanderson was in his slop era. Like, maybe he was, like, losing money in this time. Like, these last few books have been, like...
I don't want to be that harsh to this book because I do think, again, the first third, there's something redeemable there. And I don't think that this is written...
To me, the book is functional and utilitarian. Like, the prose is very functional, but it's not interesting. And, like, I feel like that's what you do in a first draft, is, like, you just try to get to the end of the story and make it functional. This
is also the only book that he's notably said he would like to come back to and rewrite completely. So, like, in many ways, you're correct, Taylor.
And also, you're right that it's like it's very utilitarian setup, because I like Era 2 of Mistborn broadly, like as a whole. I think it's really fun. I like the later books. I did really like the last book that came out a couple years ago, I think. It does basically feel like this book is here to explain the changes in the Mistborn world building that you need for the real story. This book is here to explain that we're in 1920s America now. There's no such, Mistborn are like legendary mythical, they're not a thing. And like full fear-chemists are also not a thing. Like people are born with one metal power of each or whatever, or not born at all with them. This book is here to explain how the world has changed so that when the real story starts, with Shadows of Self.
I think there's a better version of this book, or maybe this entire series, that is a 15 short story collection. And it probably is pretty cool.
I mean, I think another reason, like, why I see this as a first draft is because, like, going back through my notes, there's so many things, I guess, like, before the wedding scene, you could say, like, little quirks and ticks that Wax has that are just completely forgotten about. Like, I get, like, maybe that he only does, like, the whiskey shot of Allomancer things, like, in the roughs, but, like, I would have liked that to be at least mentioned. Or,
yeah,
like...
You're right, it doesn't come up again.
Or, like, he has, like, this eye twitch before the thing that's like very prominent. He has this prominent eye twitch that completely goes away in the second half as well. I genuinely think this is the first draft that he just like didn't have the time to go back through.
I think the eye twitch comes back once more, and there is like a mention that Wayne also does the whiskey trick. For the record, your allomantic metals have to be stored in alcohol, and both Wax and Wayne store theirs in whiskey because they are.
That's just for like sanitary reasons, basically. That's not for any like magical reasons.
Well, no, it's not for sanitary reasons. It's so the metal doesn't degrade.
Oh, right.
And like, it's also just hard to force down tiny flakes of metal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They store it in vials of alcohol, and they do it as whiskey, and they drink it that way because, like, they're cowboys and it's fun.
Right.
And, like, there's one line where it's like, Wayne does this too, and then again, that's dropped. But, like, yeah, like, just something of, like, I don't know, mention where they got the still from, like, each time they use it. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's also I would say, I don't think in the second half of this book there's even one scene where Wax tops off his metal again. Excuse me. We do it with Wayne a couple of times because he has like a rarer metal.
Yeah.
And like much more limited reserves, so it's much more important to track his. But we just assume that Wax is always topped off on his steel.
Actually, you know, for it being like quote, we'll get to this, but like quote unquote Western fiction, right? Where it's gun combat. What's a big part of gun combat in action is the need to reload. Allomancy already has a built-in you need to reload mechanic, which is you need to get more metals.
I have a question, because it was in my understanding when I read the Mistborn trilogy that if you flared your metals, that was getting rid of them. Like, you flared them to the end. So I'm like...
You can flare them temporarily for a boost.
Flaring them is just pushing them harder, like burning faster.
Yeah, so you run out of it quicker.
I guess I was thinking of Durulium.
Yeah.
Duralumin.
Whatever. Who cares? I don't care.
Oh yeah, the fact that now Mistborn aren't a thing, it does become really clear that this was a magic system built for people to have all 16 powers. Because imagine being born and you're an allomancer and you're an aluminum allomancer or a duralumin allomancer.
So let's talk about how this book came to be.
I can say first what I always thought, which is like the popular like mythological conception you see on like Reddit and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sanderson planned there to be 3 trilogies. The medieval trilogy, like the original Mistborn, medieval / Renaissance-y, whatever trilogy. A trilogy that was like sort of Cold War era in terms of like technology. And then a trilogy that's like sci-fi space age.
Yeah.
And then what happened was while he was preparing this, he got an idea for a short story, like a transitory short story of like, oh, like what did Mistborn look like when it hit the like kind of Wild West times? And he just wrote a little short story and was like, wait, this is actually really fun. And it turned into a full book, which then turned into a full series. And now there's going to be 4 trilogies or series of Mistborn or whatever.
Yeah. And if you read just like preface or like the acknowledgments in the first installment, that is like a pretty natural conclusion to come to. And like he says in the new preface in the 10th anniversary edition, which by the way takes 4 pages to really explain himself, so I can see why he does this, but he says that basically it was easier to just let the rumors fly because the real long story again took him 4 pages to articulate, so it was just easier to just let everyone think that it was a short story that turned into an accidental novel.
Yeah, it's interesting. The direct quote from the first version of the acknowledgments that has this: the plan was for a second trilogy set in an urban area and a third trilogy set in a futuristic era, with allomancy, furchemy, and hemalurgy being the common threads that tied these trilogies together. This book isn't part of that second trilogy. It's a side deviation, something quite exciting that grew quite unexpectedly out of my planning for where the world would go. The point of telling you this, however, is to explain that it would be impossible to list everyone who helped me along the years. So, like, that's the original acknowledgments to the books. He's endorsing this theory.
Right. So, from what I understood, from what I read, Alloy of Law was a short story that he wrote, but when he finished the short story, it didn't accidentally become a novel. When he finished the short story, he was like trying to think about what he stopped and reconsidered what he wanted the Mistborn. Yeah, like what he wanted for Mistborn. And basically what he realized that he wanted for Mistborn was that he, He loves the big overarching plot where you follow the same characters like in Stormlight for a very long trilogy, but he knew that like people can sometimes get tired of the same characters over that long of a span. I'm sure he's probably learning this from Wheel of Time, that's my guess. He decided that he really wanted Mistborn to be the series where they're really short, snappy, and change, and the world changes, and the only thing that's kind of the same throughout these trilogy of trilogies is that the world is what kind of binds them all together. And he also wanted to address what he thought was a gap, I guess, in epic fantasy where the world never changes, like in Tolkien and stuff like that. And so my kind of understanding of like how he got here was that like it seems from this preface that he does intend to do a trilogy of trilogies, but this is the first trilogy. Like, he doesn't consider the original Mistborn a part of the trilogy of trilogies. Like, the first Mistborn is an epic fantasy, and now he's starting this new trilogy of trilogies that are all short, snappy books that are not epic fantasy. They are short, and they're just meant to, like, have a bunch of action and switch and progress the world forward between the series. Like, he basically intentionally designed the Alloy of Law and the Era 2 to be an antithesis to what he was doing with Stormlight.
Which, like, I can see how he thinks he got there, but the ending of this book is Sazed helps out his specialist boy to be the best cop. And, like, if the climax of your book hinges on the god you created in the previous book literally helping your new main character do something, perhaps you might want to reevaluate how much distance there are between these two trilogies, actually.
Also, I guess minor spoiler for the rest of the trilogy, Sazed never stops being involved.
Yeah.
I know. We'll get to this, but I know that because I read the prologue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know where you're going with the prologue, but
I'm curious I'm so curious what you pick up on and like what theories you get and stuff.
Based on like what you have written, Taylor, I think you are so on the money, and I'm so excited for it.
Wait, where's Taylor's note? Whatever, not important right now.
Do we want to do discussion of genre?
Sure. I just don't know what this is going to be about. I'm excited.
The thing that got in my head about genre for this book that was we were discussing in chat a little bit before. Graham, you had asked, because we had started reading and you hadn't read yet, and you had asked us, how well does this do at being a Western? And Taylor responded, well, it kind of isn't a Western. And then we talked a little bit about how the popular idea, like when people pitch this book, they often say it's Mistborn in the Wild West, which is just objectively not true. Like, yeah. They're only in the Wild West for the prologue. The book is more a person who was a Wild West lawman comes back to the city and has to be like a detective, like a noir detective. That's like, sort of. And I know, Graham, you have more to say about this.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's using the aesthetics of the Western and it's using the aesthetics of noir, but I don't think it's actually meaningfully either of those genres. Because, like, you have a gunslinger, a heroic gunslinger, but like, and you know, I'm not expecting Brandon Sanderson to be like a Cormac McCarthy or a Larry McMurtry or anything like that, right? These like very focused or like grand Westerns that have like very specific ideas about American political ideology. Sanderson's just never going to write that book. And honestly, I don't want him to. However, like using the aesthetics of a Western is totally fine. But
can I also add, it is the tone of the book is also very goofy Western. Like, yes. There's a lot of like slapstick Western.
Oh, there's a lot of like they just escape an explosion and then they're like making quips about it, like very like masculine, like man, we'll really go through it all the time, don't we? Huh?
There was a part where Renette puts a gun out the door and Wax and Wayne get out of the way, and then like a second later they pull Marassi out of the way as like a joke, like as like a silly little like, oh, you gotta come too, like
this would be a great cartoon, honestly.
Yeah, like a goofy Western.
Yeah, like this feels like very of a piece with like the spaghetti western. It also feels very of a piece with Blazing Saddles. I don't know this. Actually, no, you know what? I do know this for certain. I'm sure Brandon Sanderson loves Blazing Saddles. Like, I think he thinks that movie rules. Which, you know what? It does. That movie genuinely holds up.
Good opinion. Good take.
Good take. However, Taylor, you made the point of it's a noir story. Jackie made the point that it's a noir story. It's using the aesthetics of a noir story, particularly in the sense that once you go sort of get to the hard-boiled noir, the detective genre stops being about doing detective work, and it becomes about shooting people to solve crimes, which, like, this is what this book is about, because we don't get a single second of detective work in this whole book.
We do get a second. I'd say we get at least 2 seconds.
Well, what do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean? Because
Here's what I mean. We get a lot of our main character doing detective work, but we don't actually get any detective work. And what I mean by this distinction is our main character will tell us the conclusions he's come to after examining evidence, but we never get to see the evidence.
Okay, I understand.
Or we get to see the evidence after. Sometimes we get to see the evidence after he said the conclusion.
Right. Like, for example, beginning of the book, he's trying to figure out these train robberies. He's asked his butler, or maybe his maidservant, I can't remember which, to get a bunch of newspapers called broadsheets, and he's paging through them, and he's trying to figure out the mystery. Now, there's no epistolary work done here. Like, think how much better this book would be if Wax sits down to read the newspapers, and we read an article written by, like, a in-world newspaper reporter detailing the accounts of the train robberies, because he said there's ones accounting, like, everything that's happened, and we have to parse with him, okay, how much of this is bullshit, how much of this is sensationalist, what's actually useful?
You know what this reminded me of? The H.Bomber videos on Sherlock, on BBC Sherlock, the later series, and how in BBC Sherlock there's like it gets to the point where there's no detective work being done. It's just Sherlock telling us the answer and then like telling us all the magic detective work he did to have gotten to the answer, but we never actually see it.
Yeah,
I will say, I read through all of the news. There's like little newspaper bits in this book, and there was a point where I was reading through the newspaper bit, and I was like, "Oh God, journalism in Scadrial is bad." So maybe like Sanderson shouldn't have maybe done that, because I don't think that writing in the tone of like, there's like this weird direct quote that he tries to put in there, and I'm like, this is not journalism. Like, what is this?
Well, I mean, journalism used to be much less prestigious in that era, but something tells me that's not what he was going for.
Side note, those little snippets of newspaper that have nothing to do with the plot the way Graham is describing, where like we get to see Wax reading a report and whatever. These are just meant to be fun little like, here's a newspaper from this era, and it's like weird stories and stuff. Those newspaper snippets are so popular for like Cosmere fans searching for Cosmere references. And there are several, and those become like the main source of like secret Cosmere references.
Of course they do. There's a freaking interludes of this series.
I was actually going to say, Jack, it's good that you brought up Sherlock Holmes, because I was going to bring up that point of, and that is a great video. H. Baumgartner makes fantastic stuff. This is most similar to a Sherlock Holmes story, but it doesn't have any of the good detective work of a Sherlock Holmes. Like, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, A Study in Scarlet, you can, like, learn things about detective work. The fact that, like, oh, here's something that you learn about a body, because Arthur Conan Doyle is a doctor. Here's the other thing. Wax just simply isn't smart enough to be Sherlock Holmes. He's not that smart a guy.
And it's funny you say this reads like a Sherlock Holmes story, because according to the annotations of this book, Sanderson was very consciously and intentionally drawing on Sherlock Holmes for this story.
That's a bold choice to go for, you know, the best there is. And
I think what we're coming down on genre is that this book isn't like actually it isn't a Western or noir Mistborn. It's Western or noir as like set dressing. Like he wanted to do Mistborn with gunfights and trains and electricity and like 1920s America.
Yes, which
it's what is it not? I'm sorry. Is it not like 1880s, 1890s? It's not 1920s.
Maybe that's more accurate, because I think they progress pretty quickly. Like I
think
because
in the 20s is when they started making westerns about the 1880s.
The minorest of spoilers for the whole era, but this entire era is basically going to speed through 1880s to like 1980 in terms of like technology.
Interesting.
The end of book 4 we're going to be in 1980.
So you're saying like by the end of era, or by the end of book 4, we'll have like television in color.
Sort of asterisk. The point I'm trying to make is not the exact decade. The point I'm trying to make is that if you try to nail it down to a specific decade of American history, you are going to be inaccurate, because what's the word for it? It's more like a weird blend of America between 1880 and like maybe 1940s or something, 1940s, 50s. Like it's a there's not like it's not one-to-one. Amalgamate. Yeah, it's not consistent.
Alloy.
It's an alloy. An alloy. We
Roll
did it.
credits.
Roll credits.
But yeah, I mean, that's on that point of like the way technology is progressing. Like, it's clear that he just wanted to write Wild West Mistborn and Noir Mistborn and like this era of Mistborn. Because like, don't get me wrong, I think a Mistborn train heist, cool. Like, very cool. Mm-hmm. Conceptually, though, there's almost no work in the world building to actually get there at all. And like, I'm torn on how to feel about this, but I think that ties into like a different point that we'll make later on. Do you have any other things that you want to say about genre, Jack?
I do have this is like sort of adjacent to genre, but we've talked in a few other of the episodes about Sanderson having like a pretty linear, specific Western idea of how technology progresses. Mm-hmm. And that feels very obvious here. I mean, Ellendale is literally just New York.
Yeah.
Basically, or maybe like a weird mix of New York and Chicago, but it's like very much like America, but that's very intentional. So on the one hand, like, I wouldn't want to fault him for making it very Western, like technological development, because that's clearly the point. He's not trying to present it like this is some like very different it's not like how in Stormlight he's trying to present it as if this is some very different fantasy world that doesn't work like our world, but actually does like have a lot of parallels. But there's an asterisk here. I don't want to necessarily put it in the same category of, oh, Sanderson only thinks technology progresses one way. I would say that's not the case here because it's a genre choice, until we learn that apparently most of this technology is based on God himself coming down and telling people, giving them little hints and pointers for how to progress technology. It was sort of blink and you miss it in this book, but like it's like the words of founding, like Sazed basically wrote out like, you guys will eventually discover this electricity thing. I'm not going to tell you all of it, but I'm going to give you little hints. Or don't forget to make your roads extra wide because eventually you'll have cars. Like,
this is the thing that's so frustrating to me, because I don't understand the ending of the Mistborn trilogy. The end of Hero of Ages is we have a loving God who can take direct intervention in the world. And we end up with modern capitalism somehow still. Like,
yes, this isn't a world that just happened to look like real world America. This is a world guided by a near omniscient, near omnipotent God.
And like, granted, Sazed has like limited power. Like, that's something he says at the end of the trilogy of like, because he has to hold these powers in unison, it's actually difficult for him to take action. But like, isn't the whole point that like he's learning and like he will like holding preservation and ruin together, like he becomes harmony? Why is the world so unharmonious, Sanderson?
This actually will go back to Taylor's point about the whole like this feels like a polished first draft and not like a well thought out revision. Because this discussion make me realize, I'm not going to say like what specifically, but so much of the rest of this series is going to be going back and explaining why this actually makes sense the whole time.
And I'm going to be really annoyed by that. I love the ending of Hero of Ages. This is the first time I have ever had sympathy for the Last Jedi freaks who hate that movie. This is the first time I've ever had sympathy for those people, because it's the first time I've ever engaged with something and I've gone, you have genuinely like made me upset by this existing, because it has changed my relationship to the previous one. Because again, I can't believe Sazed would allow capitalism to exist. I can't believe there's fucking nobility still. I can't believe Sazed looked at the system and was, yeah, the nobles were good.
There's like one line where Sazed as Harmony said, like, makes a point where he's like, he's really big on free will still existing, but like he did literally build Eden. Where Elendel is built is like eternally bountiful and lush and like fertile and all that stuff.
Yeah, to me, technology and society go together, but I think that society will also lead into like feminism and all that stuff. Because I have a point about society that I think,
Sure.
in my head, this is like the 1880s, and we know that what happens between the 1920s and 1940s in our world is a crazy world war. Mm-hmm. And to me, what I'm seeing, and I don't think Sanderson has, I think he might be setting this up, but I don't think that he has the skills, I guess, to follow through on it. But like, to me, it kind of seems like there's going to be some sort of like Allomancer supremacy, a la like Nazi Germany. It kind of
There's
seems
so
like
much
we're, like,
eugenics
pushing into like, I don't see. To me, in this world, in his setup, I don't see why, with all of the like things that he's set up, why Elendel wouldn't become Nazi Germany and try to eliminate like all of the non-Allomancers. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why?
You're absolutely correct. In fact, one of the annotations on this book kind of goes into that a little bit, where he basically says, this is the last one, where he basically goes like, he's been trying to resist the eugenics theme, and it's basically more and more like, because this is the only magic system he's made that's like just genetic. And I think what he's saying is annotation. Like, he basically goes on to a thing where he's like, okay, so most racism and eugenics was based on like pseudoscience, like not like they're not like a real superiority, but just like some kind of made up superiority. But then he goes, but here, like, allomancy like literally is superpowered. What he says is, well, what if there were something like allomancy? It's the only major magic system I've done that is genetic. And in this world, you have the only solid argument of, well, one genetic line is obviously quote unquote superior to another. That creates for some troubling things to think about, I should hope. It goes further than ska nobility, as talked about in the first trilogy. He basically has an annotation at the end of this book where he basically acknowledges, yeah, eugenics and like a version of eugenics that's like magic eugenics is basically inevitable in this world.
Right. Even beyond that, like in the text, one of the last things that like Uncle says to Wax in the epilogue was like, we're the nobility, they need us, basically talking about his superiority. Like, that is the kind of thinking. Oh, and also Miles is like, we are the divine, like Allomancers are the divine. And like 100% Allomancers think that they're the divine. That should have an impact on society, and that should lead to troubling things.
I will say, and I don't think, because this isn't an annotation for this book, I don't think, I would basically just say like, yeah, like eugenics will be a theme, like an explicit theme.
I'm just like, are we going to come back into like the 80s Cold War and like 90% of people are Allomancers because they like genocided the rest of the people? Just saying.
There will be that theme of eugenics going on in this series very intentionally by Sanderson. And that will be something to keep an eye out. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion. There wasn't a ton of it here, except just for Miles being like, I'm superior. Which, if you're a guy who literally cannot die, I'm not surprised a kind of shitty guy that was given more or less immortality ends up thinking like, yeah, I'm basically God.
Well, I don't know if Miles's ideology... here's the thing. Miles's ideology is completely incoherent. He's got a point as far as I'm concerned, though, when it comes to like, hey, isn't it fucked up? There's nobility.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole line about Miles would have been the hero if this was the first era.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a whole nother thing. What do we want to talk about now?
Do we want to really quick touch on how the fuck is this a society that was founded by the original group? I guess we sort of touched on that.
I think so.
But the last point is that like, this still has nobles and aristocracy. Like, the way this system is, it's not just capitalism. There are explicitly lords. The main character is a house lord who is responsible for all the people, all the peasants within his house and their business.
Not only is he a house lord, he is a direct descendant of Breeze and Alrian.
Yeah.
His last name is fucking Ladrian.
Yeah, no, he's a descendant of Breeze. Yeah.
Also, that was upsetting because,
I
like,
missed that.
we encounter, we encounter the fact that his last name is Ladrian, meaning he's a direct descendant of Breeze. We also encounter another fucking Set, or Chet, or whatever we said in the first trilogy, which means they're still around. Also, they're trying to arrange a marriage between Ladrian and this random lady Set, which, like, that's incest. Like, because again...
Okay, they do say at one point that all of them are cousins because it's only been a couple generations. And I was like, gross!
It's been like 300 years, or however many generations 300 years does. Do we know how many people were left over after the... I think it's called the Katatsandra or something. Like, that's the name for the event.
But, like, it's probably in the hundreds.
Yeah. Also, I just sent I don't know how to pronounce that word. That's what the event is called. The, like...
Katasendra.
The, like, Sazed remaking the world. All the various caves people were hiding in, which there were a bunch. Like, I think there's a whole thing where, like, every city had these caves. And, like, people fled into them. And then Sazed, like, moved all the caves together to open up into this one place that would become Elendel. So it is one of those, like, there was a humanity bottleneck. There was a genetic bottleneck.
No, he's, like, specifically says, who cares if we, like, are interbreeding? Like, we're all cousins. Like, specifically.
It's a weird thing to put in your book. I mean, I guess that on some level that's true in the real world, too. But, like, it much less likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I believe the statistic is everyone has at least a 50th of cousinality between each other.
Something
in the real
like that.
world?
In the real world, yeah. You were at least 50th cousins with even the most distant human.
Well, there you go.
But anyway, yeah, it is a little crazy that, like, the world literally ended and the founding members of the new world were the revolutionaries who tore down the old world, or, like, were big responsible for it. The system of government is the same system, except instead of, like, a emperor, a king, all of the house lords are in a senate. And, like, there are laws that say they can't abuse and rape their underlings.
I mean, God, this is the thing that really sucks. Also, like, Spook is a mythic figure.
The Lord Mistborn.
Yeah, he's the Lord Mistborn. The thing that bothers me about this the most is someone makes... It's honestly an incredible joke. Someone says, can you read High Imperial? Someone's like, a little bit, but, like, not very well. And it's Marasi, and she reads the line, and it's Spook's street slang. This A+ joke. This is very funny.
Because every time it comes up, they also make a point to say how it's such a, like, graceful, beautiful language.
Yeah, very.
Like, it's this will be a running joke in this series.
This is very, very funny. It's a terrible piece of world building because, one, I cannot believe that Spook, after everything he learned in Hero of Ages, after he had that such huge arc, he would make himself into nobility. Like, he was the most noble of the nobles, according to this.
He was the Lord Ruler. He was of the next world. He was the only Mistborn, so he was also, like, the literally most magically powerful person.
Yeah, and that sucks to me. Also, while Spook would certainly be the most powerful in this new world, Demu is still alive. Breeze is still alive. There's no way that Breeze is going to stop making fun of, like, Spook to the point where he could get away with making his street slang into a holy language.
Fair.
You know, Spook is going to live much longer than Breeze, but if you think about it for, like, 10 seconds, it sort of just crumbles under its own weight. It is a fantastic joke, but that's all it is, and I'm sort of like... For the guy who is known for really thinking about these things and sort of extruding out from these sorts of things, all the world building sort of crumbles when you think about it for a second in this one, which is really weird.
Because it really feels like... Because it feels like the choice to make it all lords and house lords and stuff is because that's Mistborn, right? Mistborn is that story that has... Those are, like, the trappings of the Mistborn story. So it feels more like the house lords are a thing because that's a... expected signifier, an expected, like, flag of, like, this is a Mistborn story, despite the fact that if you actually, you would realize, like, wait, that's actually really fucked up that they're still doing that.
And, like, the thing is, like, this often gets pitched as the Wild West Mistborn books, and, like, Sanderson clearly wants to work in this genre mode. or at least with these aesthetics. And to Taylor's point, this does feel like a first draft, because I feel like on a second draft you could realize, oh, there is actually a like really good reason for like the Wild West to emerge. Because that was the thing that I came into this book wondering, is like, well, the Wild West comes from like a really specific period of American history. How does it emerge in Scadrial? Because it doesn't seem like it would. This has been giving me a reason. There's a huge basin, Ellendale Basin, that has like constant good weather. It has wealth, all these things. It is an Eden, and they have train systems trying to expand Ellendale Basin outward and like go further. The basin doesn't actually go outward because there's a mountain range, so there's a frontier, and people on the frontier living there for whatever reason, trying to expand or get rare things that can't be gotten in the basin, all these different things. That seems like a great reason to have the Wild West, and that's not really wrapped around into the story in a way, because like Miles's motivations is not money. It's like, I have an issue with like the class system of the city, which is correct. Like he is correct there. Now he has some other bad opinions, but but like most of the objection to Miles's actual ideology is what if woke but too much.
What if it's God. What if woke but only when it's convenient to me?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it does make sense, though, that, like, you know, it has only been 300 years since essentially the world was entirely remade. So it does kind of make sense that human, like, civilization has not really spread far past, like, the basin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, there is a frontier. It's the whole rest of the world outside this one basin that humanity woke up in. What else do we want to talk about? Do you have that? Do you have this Wolverine? It's time to stop doing that now, Mo.
So the opening page of Grant Morrison's X-Men, the X-Men are fighting a Sentinel, which is like the very classic anti-mutant villains of the X-Men. It is Cyclops and Wolverine working together to take one down, and Wolverine is basically beating the shit out of one's corpse. And, like, he's defeated it. It's the end of the battle. And Cyclops says, Wolverine, it's time to stop doing that now. And he's basically looking directly at the reader, looking at the camera, saying, hey, reader, my X-Men is going to be different. Like, it's time to stop fighting our old villains. It's time for the X-Men to start doing something new. And Morrison's run of the X-Men is fantastic. It has weird and bad art, but the writing is all stellar. And it's probably the best the X-Men have ever been in terms of writing. The reason I bring that up here is this book starts the same way. I was so excited at the start of this book because we have Wax go out on a midnight raid, and he's like, I'm going to go be a cop in the streets, and like, I'm going to go do cop things, and he tries to prevent a routine bit of gang violence, fucks it up enormously. The police handle it really professionally and quickly, and then he sort of morosely goes home, gives his mist coat, not his mist cloak, to his butler, and then hangs up his guns, and he goes, well, I fucked that up, and also the city doesn't really seem like it needs me. Wolverine, it's time to stop doing that now. And I was so excited because I was like, what a great way to introduce your hero. What a great way to introduce your, like to introduce your new trilogy by going, all this shit that you loved in the old series, guess what? There's not going to be a lot of that in this series. This has to be different. And then by the end of the book, we have a Mistborn doing a showdown. Not a Mistborn, but like we have an Allomancer doing a showdown in the mists wearing a mist coat with his old guns. And I was like, well, then what was the point of any of that? And like, it's somewhat noir of like a cop who like needs to retire, but like, if you're going to commit to that level of noir aesthetic, and I'm sorry to be going back to genre, do more of what noir is good at. Because, like, the reason I say this isn't a noir, and it's just the aesthetics of noir, is a noir isn't about the mystery that the cop is currently solving. The mystery that you are trying to solve in a noir is who is the detective? What do they bring to the story? What's wrong with them? And the fact that we start with the prologue and we know what's wrong with the cop right from the beginning. The cop shot his wife in an accident and like it's deeply fucked up. what ended up happening there. Honestly, that scene is the most genre we get of, like, he has a showdown with a serial killer in a church in, like, a Wild West frontier town. That's, like, the most Western you can get. Then that would be a great transition to noir if that was a reveal of some kind. And, like, we don't really learn about Wax and what he brings to the world in that way. Because the ending of this book is him in the exact same scenario as the prologue. And actually, he can make the shot, because he is the best cop in the world. And he should have never doubted himself, because he's so good that he can shoot 2 bullets and have them collide, and the bullet deflects into the head of a dude. And it's like, I think that perhaps if you shoot your innocent wife while attempting to take down a serial killer, perhaps you should reflect on whether or not you should retire and be doing something else.
Taylor.
Thank you. This is going to be, I have a point on Lessie in the misogyny and feminism part of our notes, so we can kind of transition into that. But my points on Lessie is that he has created a perfect character, and he went, oh fuck, I need to give this perfect character a flaw. He kills his wife. Actually, I don't want my perfect character to have a flaw. Actually, like, I don't want him to have a flaw. Actually, that thing that he did where he killed his wife, that actually has no impact on the story, like, whatsoever. Like, actually at all. Like, he actually doesn't even like his wife that much. He barely thinks about her. He barely talks about her. He's not even mourning her at all in his head. I mean,
it does a little bit in the first.
You mean before the wedding scene? You mean before the wedding scene? You mean the part that was a short story that he actually went back to revise, and not just all the weird first draft shit that he, like, spewed out at the end of it?
Yeah, so before the wedding scene, everything was pretty good.
To me, what tipped me off to being annoyed about this fact was, like, when he was literally, like, setting up a new marriage to Steris, and he thought about Leslie, like, one time.
Yeah.
And, like, he wasn't even, like, this wasn't, like, a death march for him. He was, like, nervous and excited and peppy, like, oh, no, like, I need to get this marriage. And I'm like, why are you not depressed as hell because you have to be forced into a new marriage? I don't know.
I think the dominant emotion I got from the whole, like, having to marry Steris thing was a, duty. Not like death march, but like a annoying thing he has to do as part of being the lord of a house.
No, I don't even think it's that. Like, I think genuinely the thing he feels compelled there is, like, I have a duty to make this marriage work because there are now 20,000 people who depend on me. Because apparently we're using fucking British landlord systems in terms of, like, how wealth is made. Also, on that point, like, the setup is very Jane Austen, and as, like, a huge Jane Austen fan, I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, this is very Regency drama.
I can see it, I guess.
Of, like, Wax has can trace his family back to the founding, and he is, like, a deeply important man, and now he's the head of household, but he's not very good at it, but he has a huge amount of social capital, but he has no money, and this woman he's marrying is hugely wealthy, but has no social capital, and it's like, well, that's a very, like, Regency drama, like, good romance setup. And then she's kidnapped, so you don't have to deal with that part of the book. You can go back to doing your cop fan fiction.
Just to be honest, I just thought that, like, with that, and I think just, like, most of the characterization in this book to be very, like, inch deep. Like, I don't think that he... I was, like, waiting for there to be, like, deep emotions that he felt and to him to have, like, strong reactions to things. And it was just like, and he does the next thing.
The only time we had a strong reaction was when he froze, when the scene Graham was talking about, that was like the Wolverine you have to stop scene, where he went to go stop the cop or stop the gang and, like, froze. Like, that's the most, like, strong reaction. The only other reactions were occasionally Wayne would make a reference to Lessie, and Wax would tell him to, like, stop, like, don't, like, stop talking about it, basically.
Yeah.
Taylor, onto your point about, like, Vin is supposed to be, like, the ideal of femininity in this world. Like, we actually get a line that suggests that. We had that character that was actually following that ideal. It was Lessie, and she died in the first few pages.
It's also, I do like the implication that the term vindication comes from Vin because of the name of the gun. That's funny. Like, it's like, you know what? Sure, I think that, like, Vin is vindicated. Why not?
Side note, I do really like Steris, though.
I don't know how to feel about Steris, because we have like 2 scenes of characterization from her, and then in the first scene she delivers exposition, and in the second scene she's a damsel in distress.
No, like, what's good about Steris is that she's so on the surface level still that I can't be disappointed that she has no characterization.
You know what? That's fair. I'll give you that.
I think I'm really going to hold on to this description you gave, Taylor, about how this feels like a first draft was never revised. Once again, like I've already read this series, so I know what like characterization is upcoming, and I think I forgot how bad this first book was at setting everything up. Like book 2 is going to feel like the real book 1 to this series, where it's like, oh, now we're getting actual characterization and stuff.
And for the record, if like this is again why I think this should be a short story collection. Because there's a couple of stories that I think I don't need more with Sanderson, hardly ever. This is one of the rare occasions where I'd be like, I kind of do want a little bit more. Because, like, Wax and Wayne have such a good dynamic. Like, again, the fucking wedding scene where it's like the 2 of them being the best of bros working together, that shit rules. Like, Ooh. It's some of the best action Sanderson has ever written. It's the closest his banter has ever been to something where I'm like, okay, I don't love this, but I can get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how the Twinborn powers interact with each other, also super cool.
Yes.
Like, all of that shit is great, and I'm so glad that we now get to see combat-focused Feruchemists. Like, that is something that, it's like, you know, Sazed was a scholar, and I think all his fight scenes rule. Where he 1v1s Marsh, he takes on a couple of Kandra, all that shit is awesome. But to see someone who's like actually a skilled combatant use Feruchemi is like so cool.
I also thought that Wayne's speed bubble was an awesome literary device.
Yes,
like, we get to hit the pause button mid.
I'm looking for the line right now, but at the wedding fight, God, I really want to. Oh, here, I think I found the chapter. I'm still looking for the exact line, but like there's like Wayne Wax is at the wedding. Wayne is there. Wayne shows up to basically. Wayne's been trying to convince Wax to get back in the game. Like, hey, I'm trying to stop these robberies. I need your help. Wax keeps going, no, that's not my life. And even when the Vanishers show up. Like the bandits show up, Wax is still like, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to start. I'm not a lawman anymore. I'm not going to start a gunfight in this room. They're here to like steal things. It's not worth starting a gunfight and having bystanders killed just to stop like them from stealing jewelry or whatever. But then the bandits shoots a person and like actually kills a person. And that's when Wax is like, okay, now I have to do something. And specifically what happens is Wayne throws up a speed bubble. So everything outside of them is basically frozen in time. And they have this moment where they stand up and like shoulder on like their weapons and just have this kind of like, welp, I guess we're doing this, right? And they have this like...
It's great. It's really good.
Like mid all of the fight scenes, we get to hit the pause button for a second and just just talk about what to do like next. There's this mechanic. I don't know how niche this is. I don't know how many people played this game, but I watched Walton play it. There's this mechanic in the Guardians of the Galaxy game where you can have a group huddle mid-fight. And the whole screen goes to a group huddle mid-fight, and they just do like a, I don't like a bardic inspiration. I'm like you get to like hype your entire like team up basically, and you get like a level up. It's like that. Like you just
that's
get to, like,
really. I didn't know that was a mechanic in that
button.
game. That's really good for like a comic book thing of like, because of course that happens in comic book movies. You have a moment where, like in the fight where you convene with your team and then you are re-energized. That's great.
It's the same thing.
I found the page. It's 113 of at least my copy, which I don't know if mine's the 10th edition. It doesn't matter. So this is the boss, who we later learn is Miles, saying, "You can have some fun, boys. Burn it out of your blood quickly. Let's meet outside. Let's..." Everything froze. People stopped in place. The curling smoke hung motionless. Voices quieted, whimpering halted. In a circle around Waxilium's table, the air rippled just faintly. Wayne stood, shouldering his dueling canes, inspecting the room. He was placing each and every one of the bandits. Waxilium knew, judging distances, preparing himself. As soon as I drop the bubble, this place is going to erupt, blah, blah, blah. They chat a little bit about their plan. Wayne asks, "So are you going to fight or not?" "I've tried waiting," Waxilium says. "I gave them a chance to leave. I tried to give this up. You gave it a good show, Wax, he grimaced. Too good of a show. Wax rested his hand on his pistol, then he picked it up. So be it. With his other hand, he poured out his entire pouch of steel into his wine cup, then downed it. And then they just like chat for a little bit more, like have some banter. It's just this like moment of like, it was so cool because this is the moment where Wax decides, no, I am actually going to fight. Like I try not to fight. And to have that moment be in this little pause moment where he got to like chat with his friend.
Yeah.
I'm glad you highlighted this scene. I think you're missing one of the best elements of it, which is Marasi is there watching. And I think Marasi is a really good functional character. I don't know if she's a good character. And what I mean by a functional character is like, clearly Sanderson has a lot of thoughts about modern criminology. It's weird that they're in this 1920s genre thing, and we'll get into that later. But the main thing that Marasi brings that I think is actually really useful is it's really fun in a book to have a fangirl. And like the fact that we have someone who's like read all of the stories about Wax and Wayne that we haven't read is fun. And the fact that we have a viewpoint character for their dynamic that is not the two of them is especially good. And I think it's really underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
Sanderson is one of the things we've highlighted. He's actually pretty good at point of view. When he wants to be. But I think he undervalues how useful a normal ass dude is at point of view, because that is the real sauce to Sherlock Holmes. Is you have a Watson. You have Watson, who's educated. He's like a smart guy. He's a doctor. He's a veteran. He has a bunch of different things going for him. But at the end of the day, he's our point of view character. He's the one we most relate to. Again, if you're going to have that dynamic in its detective things, and there's, Wayne sometimes functions as Watson, Marasi sometimes functions as Watson. I think there's like a brief bit where his fucking butler, his butler's name is Tiam, and his one character trait is that he makes tea. Like, you gotta do something a little better than that, of like naming your fucking, like, your tea dude like Guillaume, but what if instead of Guillaume it's Tiam? Okay, anyway.
Marasi is the closest we get to like a normal person being an effective member of the team. And then we learn she also is a wizard. It's just her power is generally considered like sort of useless and embarrassing. So for propriety reasons, she like mostly hides it. Because her power is not useful in a fight, except like in the really clever circumstance at the very end. Her power is basically just like, oh, I'll freeze myself in place and basically skip forward in time, which sounds useful in like non-combat situations, like generally.
Yeah.
Like I'm waiting for my pot to boil. Let me just skip forward a little bit.
I feel like, Taylor, there was a point you were making that we got sidetracked from.
About feminism generally.
But let's go back to it, because there is a lot to be said there.
Yeah, you were talking about how Marasi is like a point of view character. Oh, I also wanted to say that if you hadn't watched last episode, Sophie kind of brought up a point about having like a corrector and the corrected, and I feel like a lot of the time Marasi and Wax kind of fell into this corrector-corrected dynamic as well. Mm-hmm. Like in a few scenes. It wasn't like totally like the whole time, but it was like a few scenes.
Wax would make some point on like, old Western lawman like wisdom of just like, this is how he does things. And then she would chime in with like well, actually like criminal statistics play out like this way. Like Wax would mention
I think Taylor was more referring to the opposite, where Marasi would say something about her life, or about Wax's life, and Wax would correct it. It's like, actually, it was like this.
It's both ways, I guess. Yeah, Jack's right, too. Marasi was also, for some reason, the target of all of Wayne's misogyny. I hated that part of it. It happened so many times, too. Like, I was so confused.
Every once in a while, Wayne would say something like really crude and gross.
There's one version of that where it genuinely got me to laugh really hard, which is unfortunate, where Marasi being like, I have some surgical skills, the university encourages a broad education, and Wayne just being like, I know that they take girls now, what does that have to do with anything? It's like, that's great, that's a good joke.
And it's one of those things where it's like, It's like the narrative definitely it treats Wayne's misogyny as, I don't want to say the word exceptional, but like not everyone talks like Wayne, but they also treat his misogynistic jokes as very like, Wayne, you know that's bad, but it's just Wayne.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Wax is like the perfect character, except for like maybe his one flaw is that he lets Wayne like talk to women like that. Like, I'm gonna just keep going here. So I think that a part of this book that I found very unrealistic was a function of the patriarchy is like telling women to stay indoors and don't go out alone at night because you're gonna get, raped and murdered and kidnapped, raped and murdered, right? Like that's like it's like there is some truth, but a lot of it is meant to keep women indoors historically, and is like a reason why like women have been denied rights in the past. And so the fact that, like, I just had such a big problem with the scene when they were, like, trying to figure out why Steris was, like, why all these women were being kidnapped. Because, like, Wax is on the floor, like, trying to figure out these bloodlines. And it takes them, like, a long-ass conversation for Marassi to be like, well, maybe they're doing a breeding program. Because, like, in my head, the second Steris became a hostage, I was like, thank God this is a Sanderson book, because in any other normal circumstance, like, she'd be going to get, like, raped and, like, in, like, a horrible, violent situation. But good news, she's in a Sanderson book, so that's not going to happen. And then we got to, like, the end of the detective work, and turns out that he actually did think that this was going to be a breeding program. And so I was just like, when Marassi was getting kidnapped, when Steris was getting kidnapped, that was top of, like, there's no world in which that wasn't top of mind. There's no world in which, at least for Marassi, that wasn't the first thing she thought of. It was just so, like, I don't know. I hated that, like, that took so long to get to, because I assumed we were not going to get to it. Like, I was like, oh, okay, there's going to be some other conclusion, because this is a Sanderson novel, and he doesn't want to talk about how hostages get raped.
Sanderson is so averse to putting any form of sexuality in his book. And, like, you know what? Whatever. If you don't want to write sex, you don't want to write sex. It's fine. I'm not upset about... I actually am kind of upset about Heartstopper not having, like, any kind of sexuality in it. But regardless, there is clearly an audience and a venue for, like, here's something completely sexless. That's fine.
Did you mean Warbreaker?
I'm using that as an example of, like, something that is completely sexless, that, like, clearly there's an audience for it. But the fact that Sanderson doesn't have any sexuality in his books apart from sexual assault and rape is frustrating, because, like, he's often quoted as someone, and it's like, look at how he's different from other fantasy authors who so casually put in, like, rape into their worlds. And it's like, I don't know, I kind of think he just hides it better. Because, like, it's plot critical to both Mistborn trilogies so far.
Yeah, like a breeding program.
Yeah, that was...
Like, this to the terrorist people were, like, a breeding program.
Not to mention just, like, the implicit rape of... the noblemen to create more mistings.
Yeah.
I mean, this is literally just that again, which, once again, it is, the villain's plan. It's not like this is, like, good guys doing this. Also, every this is kind of what we were saying before about eugenics kind of being an inevitable theme.
Unfortunately, well, actually, hold on. It's not inevitable. Sanderson wrote this. Like, he chose to write this.
Well, what I mean by inevitable is he wrote a magic system that's genetic in a world where, like, in the Mistborn series, he decided, like, rape and sexual assault were going to be common. I feel like that's it's almost like an inevitable, with that groundwork, it's almost inevitable that, like it would be weird to have an absence.
Hold on. I know where you're coming from, Jack, but also no one was pointing a gun at Sanderson saying, I'm forcing you to write this. These are all choices he made. The plot didn't have to be kidnapping. Rape didn't have to come into it. Mistborn did not have to be genetic. Like, it could have been, and in fact, in many ways, they're not. Because, like, people can become Mistborn. People can become Allomancers. And, like, I don't know what I'm fully trying to articulate with this, but, like, no one was forcing Sanderson to write it this way. And it's important to remember that, like, these are all choices that he made. And I understand that he's trying to work out from the stuff that he's already done, but this is not one of the things that you needed to retread. Anyway, I'm sorry, Taylor. We keep interrupting.
No, it's fine. No, they're good points. I think there's also like a misunderstanding as well of why things are the way that they are. There's a conversation where Marassi walks into Wax's office and they dismiss the butler, and she's like, why are we alone in this room together? And Wax is like, oh yeah, propriety, like that's like propriety schmriety, like that like I forgot that even existed. And I'm like, actually propriety is to protect her from you. You're not supposed to be together in the same room because she's the one in danger. Homeboy, stop acting like you're like, oh, like propriety, like we don't have to do all these like old-timey rules. That's so silly. Like, no, it's not silly, actually. It's for her, not for you, dumbass.
And even if you are under the assumption of like, all right, for some reason this Wild West like New York City has the manners of like the centuries before nobility, like even if you make that assumption and on some level propriety is also there to protect him, it doesn't really work because again, it's not setting up to tell that story. So again, it just comes across to your point, Taylor, of like, this is mostly for her and like it's a real life or death situation. It's not a comedy of manners at all.
No, I don't know. It's just like misogyny again.
The threat is heightened by the fact that some of those men will have superpowers, such as him.
And they didn't talk about how she had the powers yet either, so whatever. And there's like... Oh, I lost it.
After all that discussion, I'm not sure this question has a lot of weight anymore. Something I wrote early in my notes was the question, when is genre an excuse for misogyny?
Never.
The more I thought about, the more I basically came to that. But the question I basically thought was, you know, there are certain things that are expected out of certain genres. In a noir, it's a classic of the noir that like the dame with the long legs walked in, like, you know, like making comments like that. And so that was a question I thought of while reading this book, is like how much of like, for example, Wayne's behavior, or how much, for example, of the chauvinistic kind of attitudes Wax has, how much of that is like because the author was trying to make it feel more like a noir, and how much of that, well, you really didn't need to put that in and that was a conscious choice to include.
If you are just putting misogyny in your book because it's the genre you're writing, interrogate that, because
exactly,
old noirs were just written by misogynists. Like, they were written by powerful, or at least typically wealthy men, or at least men who became wealthy in the 30s. There were not a ton of super woke men, super feminist men in the 1930s. And like, you know, I don't want to oversimplify things, but these authors who we remember certainly weren't. Now, in a neo-noir, if you want to put in misogyny into your book, think about it a little bit more. Like, there might be reasons that you want to, because there are misogynists in the world, and you might want your book to reflect that. Or you might want to make some sort of commentary on it. But don't just put it in because it's like, oh, that's what these other books do. And again, so much of the noir genre is completely missing from this book that, like, if that's the one thing you chose to add to make it noir-like, you fucked up. Because, like, there are so many really other staples of the genre. Like, the fact... Another one that really bothers me is, like, the whole point of noir and hard-boiled is, like, there's a really fine line between our detectives and our criminals. And, like, they often have way more in common than the detectives or criminals would really like. So the fact that our heroes are good guys... like, pretty unambiguously, they're superheroes. You know, Wayne has a backstory where he also shot and killed an innocent person, and he's completely averse to guns for that reason. It's like, well, there's something there, but that's not really noir writing either. And, like, all these other things that you could totally fold in to the story if you're going for that, go for that first. Because, like, the misogyny is the one that we should leave behind unless you are really thinking about it very thoughtfully. It is important to have the second thought.
I think that, like, the one I really don't forgive is when Wayne told Marassi that she has, like, a nice bounce in the cloud area that's above the fruitful seed planting place.
Don't remind me of that line. That line could only exist with Sanderson sitting down and thinking, I need Wayne to say something misogynistic. What's the most long-winded, overly quote unquote clever misogynistic thing.
Got this guy, right? You've got this guy who can heal super fast, and she doesn't slap him in the face. And I just I was bothered by that because
listen, implicit world building. You probably know now why Renette shoots Wayne all the time.
I would.
Yeah.
Renette, they frame Renette as being the sort of crazy one for shooting Wayne, but actually she's the only one doing the right thing.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, there's this, I mean, okay, let's pause for a second. Is chauvinism, is that when you are, chivalrous and, trying to do things for...
It has a couple of different definitions, but the one that would probably be closest to a modern understanding would be something similar to toxic masculinity, but it's a little subtler because it almost borders on unawareness of being so dismissive of women that you're extremely dismissive of women to the point where not only are their problems not an issue, but neither is anything about them interesting to you.
To me, part of chauvinism is the man who's being well, I'm the man, so I just have to protect the women because the women are small and weak and useless, and so let me it's the misogynistic chivalry. It's the chivalry for very misogynistic reasons kind of thing.
Yes. Okay, that's what I was wanting to touch on. This is kind of moving into broken windows policing and Miles's whole idea. So this is moving into Miles's thing, and that at the back of the book. Both Wax, but specifically Miles, multiple times is these poor people, these women, these children, they're all dying in the streets. And I'm do not to me pretend you care about women and that you're doing all of this shit for women and beggars, because you just had all of your people who are poor people that are working under you, they all just died. You're totally kidnapping women and you don't give a fuck where they end up because you have your own agenda.
I'm kidnapping women for the breeding camps to save women. You don't understand.
Do not come to me with your whole... Which, again, is a very common article of the patriarchy, we gotta protect the women, we gotta protect the children, we gotta protect the people who can't protect themselves. That, again, can lead to very toxic outcomes and has historically led to toxic outcomes. So specifically Miles just being I'm doing this for the women. I'm you're doing this for yourself, champ. I don't know where you're thinking that you care even a little bit about any of the women around you.
Well, that's a little bit of the chauvinism. It's the women are an object in the plot, not the plot of his ideology, not actual people that he's genuinely concerned about.
Right. And then okay, I'm gonna just make my Miles point now, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, at the end of the book, Miles and Wax are in a conversation, and Miles goes, I'm doing this, there are people that get killed on the streets, beggars, whores, orphans, they die because they're poor, because they don't have food, because they're in the wrong place. And our friend Wax says, on page 268, or 286, I'm sorry, you're trying to invoke the survivor's mandate, Wax whispered, but it won't work, Miles. This isn't the final empire of legend. A rich man can't kill a poor man purely because he feels like it. We've gotten better than that. And then 5 pages later, the rich man, Wax, who has just mass murdered a bunch of poor people, gets completely gets away with it. Completely gets away with it. He completely... Yep. Actually, the cop tells him that he now can do that legally. Guess what?
You killed those bandits so well, we're going to make it illegal for you to do it.
I was screaming into my book, what is happening? You just said 4 pages ago that that's not true, and then it's completely true. It is completely true. This is the final empire. You can't just kill whoever you want if you're rich.
It's almost worse. It's almost worse than the final empire, because, there's an active resistance in the final empire. And in this one, people are this is okay. And like the villain is the person resisting, and the villain isn't even really having a coherent ideology about resisting because he mostly wants to be king.
It's kind of funny that because when I first read this book, I was like, I don't know, like 16 or whatever. I'm not politically aware, like all that stuff. And I remember not thinking about this that much when I read the book the first time. But now reading it, every time there's this like, cool badass action scene, I can't help but just think like a lot of these gang members or robbers, like they're doing robberies and the police are gunning them down instantly.
Yes.
100%.
I kept thinking about that. I was like, cool action. Why are the police just gunning down anyone that's like remotely a criminal for any reason? Like it's like, cool, badass action. All that guy did was steal a piece of jewelry, and you're just like, I'm gonna shoot
the
him
death
to stop.
penalty.
Shoot him in the head.
Actually, the death penalty for that.
And that's never addressed. Like, he's never questioned, like, did you actually have to kill those people? Or there's not like an attempt to like arrest and restrain that then is foiled and so he's forced to shoot. It's shoot first. He doesn't go to the bandits and is like, and like put them up, like put your hands up, and then they pull guns and then he shoots them. He ambushes them. He attacks first.
Yeah, and again, like Sanderson often gets criticized as very video gamey. This is the most video gamey he is, where it's like you don't even think about the fact that like that person had like an entire life. Not to go back to Morrison, but I do think Morrison is outstanding. There's a comic book that he wrote where the hero just kills this random dude who's just a random henchman, and then the rest of the issue we stop following the hero, and it's just like a quiet meditative 30-page issue about this dude's entire life and everything he has been, and like his family and his dreams for the future and why he was specifically guarding this post. I don't think Sanderson has ever had that thought in his life.
The nobleman, mind you, the nobleman just flattened a building on these people.
Awesome action scene.
So
think about it
cool.
for a second longer about what actually happened.
So cool. Bestie, who gave you the power of execution? I like, who made you judge, jury, and executioner? I don't know why you keep getting away with this.
Didn't they literally make a comment where like when they deputize him, they also backdate it to retroactively make all of his actions legal? Yes,
to make them legal because because the constables didn't want to be embarrassed. They were like, he was working for us the whole time.
I think this is speaking of police conduct, I think this is a great time to transition into I have a whole spiel about the broken windows theory.
Before we do, I do have a little bit more to say about Miles.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to bring up about Miles, I don't need my villains to be entirely coherent, but I do wish that there was more of an attempt to engage with the fact that he is making a very real and fair criticism of the society that has been created. It's unjust, it's capitalistic, it sucks, there's a lot wrong with it, and he also sort of just wants to be king of the ashes. Like, there's a point where, like, he's been stockpiling aluminum so he can actually start his own group and, like, separate from Mr. Suits, which also, Mr. Suit, Rizless, sauceless villain.
He's like the true villain behind it. He's the one who's like wanting the women for the breeding thing.
Yeah, I mean, and the main thing that really bothers me about Miles is like he does get close to having all this interesting ideology. He's the closest to a noir character as well. And then you get to his death and he goes, "You are fools," Miles yelled at the firing squad. "One day the men of gold and red, bearers of the final metal, will come to you, and you will be ruled by them." "Worship," Miles said, his voice failing, his mouth spouting blood. "Worship Trell and wait." Now, I don't know who the fuck Trell is. I don't know what this means entirely, but the fact that our villain, who did have some legitimate points, it's revealed at the end that, like, both him and his secret boss have an extra secret boss. And I don't know what this is. I don't think it's odium. But
we've heard the name Trell before in the first Mistborn. One of the religions.
Yeah, one of the religions is Trell. I looked that up.
Yeah.
Now, knowing that, like, this is one of the religions that Sazed had offered, and, like, knowing a little bit more about how gods work in the Cosmere, this is probably another H.A.R.R.E interfering on Scadrial. I don't know which one. I don't know why. But the fact that it's like, actually, this is all revealed to be part of someone else's divine plan really irritated me.
Yeah, it was a class thing, and then right at the end, it's like psych divine. And wait, this is back to what you were saying, Taylor, about how he's trying to not do epic fantasy, but then he couldn't help but put in, and actually gods are involved. actually, it's a battle between gods. It's between Sazed and whoever this Trell person is.
I didn't even connect that. I just completely like let that go.
The fact that we figure out that, like, Atium is connected to ruin and the green ball is connected to preservation. So the reason I thought it was, like, the final metal, and it's like, well, that's probably another metal connected with another god.
Oh, okay. I see that. Oh my god. That's so stupid.
And, like, yeah, that's the thing of, like, well, clearly there's metals for every god as well, in addition to, like, these 16 god connected metals. And I don't know.
I see that. Okay, I see where you're connecting that. And I think that goes with my prediction, but keep going.
Yeah.
So moving on a little bit, because I think we should not talk much more about the god stuff, because there's not much more to say without risking more spoilers.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to give a quick spiel on the broken windows thing. On page 176, this is when Marasi and Wax are chatting, and like chatting just about his time as a law stuff. As a lawman, Marasi is talking about crime statistics and like the work she's doing. And she's basically talking about like ways to cut down on crime that aren't just like, going out on cool, super heroic, flying around shooting like shooting like train fare skippers in the head or something. And she name drops broken windows theory, which is a real world criminology. And something interesting is that what she describes is not broken windows theory as it is in the real world. It's kind of weird. So this is like an example of that like second thought, like not having that second thought, or not having that revision, or not having these beta or these like sensitivity readers, because this is a big example of Sanderson like pulling something from the real world without really thinking about or understanding what it means. What Marasi says is she first describes how like this one guy bought a bunch of land, renovated it to be really nice, and then crime went down. And then she says, because she's talking about how renovation is a big strategy for cutting down on crime. What she says, it's called broken window theory. If a man sees a broken window in a building, he's more likely to rob or commit other crimes since he figures nobody cares. If all the windows are maintained, all the streets clean, all the buildings washed, then crime goes down. Just as a hot day can make a person irritable, it appears that a rundown area can make an ordinary man into a criminal. She then goes on to say, cleaning up a few streets can be cheaper than employing more constables, and actually decrease crime to a greater degree. So she's using broken windows theory as a like, that's a call for renovation. However, real world broken window theory is a little different. Real world broken windows theory is the idea that the presence of low level lawlessness makes like greater crimes more common. So things like vandalism, things like littering, things like skipping train fares, things like jaywalking and loitering, like if a place has more low level crime, that will lead to more high level crime in a weird twisted version of like environmental impact on crime. And the real world broken windows theory is therefore hire more cops and crack down harshly on these minor crimes. The real world broken windows theory is not let's renovate and clean up this area to make it or put more money into a poor area to make it less crime ridden. The real world broken windows theory is, hey, if cops are cracking down really hard and harshly on people doing vandalism or litter or like jumping the turnstile, that will lead to less crime. And it was an excuse in New York to put like more cops in poor racialized neighborhoods.
Very famously, it was a huge Rudy Giuliani policy. This is what gets the creation of stop and frisk. It's a bunch of like really terrible things. And it's also worth noting that the originators of the theory, regardless of what their intents may be, because I don't know them as people, but they are deeply, deeply conservative men who worked for a conservative think tank. So like... I don't think that they had the best of intentions when coming up with this theory in its more generous reading of like, if you improve an area, which again is not actually the theory.
Yeah, the theory is not if you improve an area, crime goes down. That's what Sanderson through Marasi, who Marasi is meant to be this intelligent person that's correct about criminology. Like the narrative very much is like, no, she is smart and knows what she's talking about. In the book, broken windows theory is, oh, poor neighborhoods have more crime, so if you renovate poor neighborhoods to be nicer, they'll have less crime.
Which is gentrification.
Which is just gentrification. It's kind of interesting. It's just
you're criminalizing the poor regardless, just in two different ways.
It's such a weird thing. It's so weird, especially since he doesn't just have Marasi spout a criminology theory that you in the real world, if you know about this stuff, can be like, oh, that's basically broken windows theory. She name drops it. She says it's called broken windows theory.
Yeah.
It really feels like Sanderson encountered it in a superficial way. Like, what it sounds like is Sanderson encountered a superficial, generous reading of broken windows theory, which was that a bad environment can lead to more crime, so fix the environment. And just, like, didn't think more about it and, like, put it in his book. That's what it feels like happened.
It's also worth noting that this, like, policy led to a bunch of, like, deeply fucked up policies of, like, there are people in Rikers Island today because of New York City adopting broken windows theory, and, like, the strikes policy as well, famously, of, like, if you commit enough low-level crimes, your punishment will become more severe. Mm-hmm. There's a gentleman in Rikers Island who, if I find his name later in the show notes, because I'm not going to spend 5 minutes looking it up right now, but there's a gentleman who ended up in Rikers Island because he shoplifted, like, 4 times, and that was enough to land him a 20-year sentence in Rikers Island.
No, we, like I said, I'm literally about to have my criminal law final. One of the earliest cases we went over, if I can find the actual name of it, scrolling through my notes that I still have open in another tab. One of the cases we went over is, the strike system, but in California. Like, a man stole, like, he stole golf clubs a few times, and, like, the third time he did it, he got, like, a crazy higher sentence, despite the fact that none of his other robberies were, like, felonies. But then he got a felony sentence because of strikes. And the Supreme Court at the time upheld that the 3 strikes rule is allowed and constitutional.
It fucking sucks. That feels pretty explicitly a cruel and unusual punishment. Anyway.
Irving v. California is the case I'm talking about.
Of course. The other thing that I want to bring up in terms of this is, just as a question to the class, what is the reason that crime rates fell from, like, the 1950s onward? What's the biggest motivation in lowering crime? Because there is actually a reason, and it's pretty clear cut.
I am not an expert. I am going to guess it was economic, like, boom.
That is a good guess. You are wrong. Taylor, do you have a guess?
Decriminalizing, just people living their life.
Also a good guess. That is also wrong. The biggest reason that we have found for crime falling, and this isn't the only reason, I think both of those things contributed. The biggest reason is we got lead out of paint.
Oh my god, that's not the... Okay.
No.
You're being like, okay, I see.
No,
like
Taylor, I'm
like
not. It's not a theory. Genuinely, it is it is verifiable. It is extremely studied.
Like a studied phenomenon.
It is an extremely well-documented, studied phenomenon that, like, genuinely one of the best things you can do to improve an area is to strip an area of lead paint. It is that much of a neurotoxin. It increases violent behavior and antisocial behavior that much. For every $1 you spend on lead paint removal, you get it's the equivalent of spending $17 on other societal programs. Like, it is genuinely a silver bullet solution. It is super good. Getting lead pipes out of buildings, getting lead paint out of things. And, like, genuinely, that it is one of the most common cited of, like, what an incredible thing we did of getting lead out of gasoline, of getting lead out of paint. Like, this dramatically reduced crime. It is a huge public safety thing, and it's super fascinating. And
unfortunately, in the world of Mistborn, everything is required to be laced slightly with metal at all times, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah, the fact that everyone is casually eating pewter. Casually eating lead.
But they're burning it off.
They're burning it off. But, like, yes, that, like, genuinely, that is one of the main things that we see in terms of reducing crime. And, like, I guess that's technically renovation, but that's not, like, broken windows theory was a bad policy in the real world. And it's weird to see it here.
But that's what I mean when I say, like, it really feels like Sanderson encountered a very superficial, generous explanation for it, and then put it in his book about, like, police work and crimes and all that stuff. Because, like, it would be different if, like, he didn't name drop broken windows theory. If it was just Marasi being like, oh, yeah, it's a current theory about crim law we have right now, that environment does all this stuff, then this would be a different conversation. But he name dropped a real theory, like a real life criminal law theory.
Yeah.
And then got it wrong.
Yes. We shouldn't let this go too much further because, I don't want to just shit talk Giuliani for an hour. Actually, I do, but not for this podcast.
That's the next podcast. That's a spinoff.
I wanted to, still on this kind of like, I wanted to talk about like the idea that the roughs don't have a law. And like, I was hoping Jack could maybe help me articulate what I was trying to say. But like, I was talking to Walton about this and he was like, you're going to really need to like, think about that because I have no idea what you're talking about. If there's no law in the roughs, as they say, there's no law, and then but there's lawmen, then like the lawmen are all just vigilantes and whatever they say is the law, then like that is like grounds for crazy like corruption, right? Like
congratulations, Taylor. you have done the same work as Michel Foucault and Achille Mbembe, and I'm so excited for you.
Usually when someone says something like this is a lawless land, that's usually rhetorical. Like, I'm sure in some Elendil legal book it's like, no, the roughs are under the legal authority of Elendil and therefore have to follow Elendil laws. And it's just the fact, well, they're not doing anything about it. They're not sending up enforcers about that. So it's just lawman. And based on like, yeah, no, the lawmen are the way this book presents it is like the lawmen are people that go up there, aren't like deputized or anything.
No.
They just go up there and start being like, I'm going to enforce the law, which frankly, the way it's described in the roughs is the law is just, are you doing a harmful thing? I am going to catch you and put you in prison. Or it's bounties. It's like a bounty gets put for you, and I'm going to go catch the person with the bounty. And that's law out there, which is a very like cartoon Wild West version of.
It's worth noting that the actual Wild West, lots of women had power, lots of black people had power, lots of Mexican American immigrants had power in a way that they typically didn't. The Wild West was much more egalitarian than the Westerns would have you believe. And like there was lots of experiments with anarchy and stuff like this. The idea of like this being a lawless land that our cowboys had to come in and impose justice on isn't really all that accurate. Now, granted, like, there were Wild West criminals, sure.
But if the lawmen and the criminals are all equally not under any law, then what does it matter? Like, what does it, like, oh.
It's the idea of the law as some platonic ideal floating up out there. Yeah. It's the idea of the law as, like, honor or goodness rather than, like, what law actually is, which is a series of legal codes socially enacted by whatever system of government is in charge.
If the lawman out in the roughs was like, oh, actually, I think not being an allomancer is a crime, and I'm going to go put people in jail for that, then, like, then what? What's the law?
I mean, to be fair, this is true in Alloy of Law. This is also true in the real world. A police officer could just decide.
It comes up in the book. There's that whole line between Miles and Wax where like the line between lawman and criminal is like really fucking thin.
Yeah. I mean, and it's literalized in the scene where since Miles is a gold compounder, he burns gold. And when he burns gold,
Augur.
An augur, yeah, and he sees the two versions of himself. Like, one is the lawman and one is what he is currently. And it's like, I mean, that's a fun way to literalize it. I do believe that based on what Miles has written and how we've learned that gold works before, he could have been other things, and I would have liked to have seen those too, but oh well.
I think the gold power is actually like a really cool like character building device. I don't think it's used as well as it could be, but I think it's really cool.
That was just like my point that I had, where I was just like, they keep talking about being lawmen in a lawless place. That's like, you're a vigilante, which is equally a criminal. Like, I don't know, like, what
Absolutely.
You're thinking.
You're being a vigilante that the community broadly is, like, supportive of. You're being, like, you're enacting violence, but it's for the betterment of the community you're in, so the community is like, okay, that's fine. And that's like sort of how it works out in the alloy of law Wild West.
I'm going to put 3 things in the show notes. I am going to link to Foucault's biopolitics. I'm also going, and probably Discipline and Punish. And I'm also going to Chile Mbembe's Necropolitics, because that one's an easier read. That's like 20 pages, and it's great.
I'm gonna post my crim law notes from our Why Do We Punish unit, which was our first unit in crim law.
Well, there you go.
I love my crim law professor. Like, literally the first couple classes were about prison abolition. It's literally like the first couple classes were like, hey, if you guys are going to practice law, one of the stakes of being whether or not you send someone to prison, I want you guys to have a very well developed and articulated idea of why or if should we punish people. Moving on a little bit, because we're running out of time, I did want to, if we're kind of done with that topic generally, if we think
I would like to say, I feel like we talk about Sanderson has a very specific way of magic developing in like a lot, or like, and like society developing. And we think we talk about that a lot. So I don't know, like we can talk about it, but like, I don't think it should be very long, because I don't think that,
no,
because I think
we've
kind of beat it.
I think, yeah, it was like I had like one line about for a society where this is back more to like the where's the allomancy art. Like, where's the art made by allomancers? It's like, this is just real world 1880 to 1920, like whatever, like hodgepodge America, except some people can like fly around or heal themselves. Like, there's not really, the world does not feel like a world where people with magic powers existed.
The only time where I think it's actually doing this work well is the work with religion. We're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense that after the events that were so dramatic at the end of the last books, there would be a ton of different splinter religions. And like Sazed tried to preserve some of them, and some of them seem to exist. Whether or not Trellism actually has anything to do with Trellism in the modern sense, we'll see. But like Sliverism is like the worship of Marsh. And
I'm a Sliverist.
Yeah, I'm also a Sliverist. I fucking love Marsh. There's like worship of Harmony, which is Wax's religion.
I like Pathism. That's the Harmony one. But their first tenet is do not seek lust without commitment.
Which doesn't feel like very a Sazed goal.
The first tenet of the religion of Harmony is don't fuck before marriage.
But like that seems so weird for Sazed, because one, like, I don't think Sazed was ever the kind to like police people's sexualities. Like, he didn't seem very concerned with that.
Anyway, one of the things you're right. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this topic because we already talked about it. I did want to jump back real quick to make a note, because we kind of skipped it from one of the previous things, which is like the LGBT rep of Renette. I want to bring that up. I want to bring that up pretty briefly because there was an interesting. I wouldn't have brought this up except I found an interesting annotation. One of Sanderson's annotations about this.
Wait, actually, before we get to this point, Jack, and for context, it's worth knowing at this point in his career, Sanderson is not super woke and has actually written a kind of gross essay about gay people, and not like he's not being actively, well, no, he is being actively homophobic in the essay, but he's not being like, I think we should hate and criminalize gay people. He writes an essay where he's like, I actually think Dumbledore is an example of good gay representation because he's not visibly gay, is a thing that he writes. And like, he clearly has like complicated feelings because he has gay friends and stuff like that. But it's worth knowing this is where he's at in his career and life, is around this time. Like, that essay was about 4 years ago is when he wrote it. I think 2008.
4 years from when Alloy of Law came out. So, yeah. and to note on that, like, that's one of the interesting things about this podcast is he writes so much and he engages with the community so much. He's clearly trying to listen to people and like update and stuff, but we are currently at a time of his career where he was visibly a lot more conservative in his writing. Mm-hmm. But so Renette is a lesbian character. She is the gunsmith that we talked about. The only textual line kind of noting this is Wayne is constantly hitting on her, and like Wayne has like a huge crush on her, and Wax makes a comment about how like, I don't think Renette likes any man like that, right? And that was, according to the annotations, meant to be an intentional nod to her being a lesbian. And this will become more explicit as like the series goes on, but like so far in this book we have a character intended to be a lesbian, but the only textual note towards that is a character saying, I don't think she's into men, and no other detail. Like, she doesn't have a girlfriend or wife. She doesn't have any other things. It's just, someone says she's not into men. Going to the annotation, however, if I can find... Wait, which annotation was this? This was... Okay, yeah, this is about Renette. So, apparently in the original conception of the story, she was a Kandra. She's not now, but when he was first coming up with the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't catch the hint from Wax, she is indeed a lesbian, though it's not much of a big deal in this book. I try to find places for LGBT characters in the novels. There's another one in Way of Kings. However, I back off from making much of an issue about it. I guess I could be accused of not giving them full representation because of the fact that they usually have minor roles. The truth is that I'm worried I'd just do a poor job of it if I tried to write from their viewpoint. Being gay is one of those things that tends to be very dominant in a person's way of seeing the world. It seems that there are a lot of pitfalls that I could saunter right into. I think I've learned after a lot of work how to write female characters who hopefully don't feel wrong. However, I haven't taken a dive into trying to figure out how to write a gay or lesbian character. But that's only one reason. There's a deeper one for me. Renette will likely get viewpoints in the series when I do more in Wax and Wayne books. However, the books aren't about sexual identity, so I'll probably steer clear of that topic. In a way, I think that making a big deal of it could be more harmful. One of the reasons I put LGBT characters in my books is because they are a part of our world and deserve representation in fiction. It's strange to think that in our world, LGBT people make up a significant minority of the population, yet in fiction, particularly fantasy fiction, they tend to either vanish completely or the story has to be about who they are and their sexuality. This strikes me as a bad way to do things. Just like not every book including women characters should be about feminism, not every book including LGBT characters should be about sexual orientation or gender identity issues. If they are, then that just highlights the supposition that they're out of the ordinary. It draws attention to that idea rather than simply letting them be characters with a larger role in the story. We don't care about Lord Harm's sexuality, Mr. Suits, or that of Miles. Why shine a big spotlight on Renette's? It just seems divisive to me. That's his thing. That's what he says about Renette's sexuality.
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. And I don't want to make the case that all depictions of queer people should in some way work within homophobia as an enemy or something like that. Because I do think that a lot of the best representation works that way, unfortunately, in our world, but not all of it. A lot of it centers around queer joy and all these different things, but it really goes to show where he's at in 2011, 2012.
I was very struck by the idea that he didn't think that his book was about feminism, or that he didn't he's like, let's not shine this giant light on feminism. Okay.
Also, real quick, you said 2012. You said 2012. These annotations were written in 2015.
Okay.
Just to
duly noted.
Make it clear what.
Yeah. Well, what about all those explicit conversations that Morassi had about feminism? I don't know. I don't
think he said his books aren't about feminism. I think he was just trying to draw an example that not every book with women characters needs to be about feminism, and his point is basically what he is trying to say is it's hard to have very explicitly gay characters without the story being about them being gay, which I don't think I need to convince my co-hosts or anybody listening that that's not true. It's actually very easy to have characters that are explicitly gay and that's a part of their personality, and the story's not about being gay.
Well, I also think that Sanderson currently in the writing of this book is having trouble imagining a gay character without homophobia, and he clearly doesn't want to introduce homophobia into his books at this point when he's writing Alloy of Law, when he's writing this annotation. I don't know that for sure, because there are tons of fantasy books that do this in more subtle ways where for example, King Renly in Game of Thrones is a gay character, and it's not subtle. Some people clearly watched the TV show and missed it in the books because they were like, I never knew Renly was gay. And it's you never knew the dude who mandated everyone wear rainbow capes was gay?
the guy who was like, I have my rainbow knights protecting me.
You never thought that guy? The dude who constantly was praying with his best friend who's super hot and asking him to teach him things about swordplay? Okay, it's not subtle, but the reason that you can miss it is there's never a scene where we see Renly sucking dick. And the reason we don't have that is because, one, in Game of Thrones, kings aren't point of view characters, and 2, which is the more important reason, is like homophobia does exist textually in Westeros, and there's a reason Renly has to hide it. Because like there's political marriages and that they're made like specifically for the procreation of children. All that is worked into like the politics and the world of Game of Thrones. And it's much easier to add that in there than it is here, where it's like you would have to do a better job of it.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said about, like, since she's a woman specifically, like, the idea of the spinster was a way to just be like, she's just living life alone, and that's what she does. Whereas, like, for men, being gay was a little bit different at the time.
And the thing is like, but it's also weird for that archetype to even exist because, I mean, this isn't really much of a spoiler, but, like, homophobia, just at least not explicitly, like it's not meant to be a part of the world. Homophobia is not a thing in this world. It's not supposed to be, at least. I'm sure there's plenty of like implicit things like from the author that sneak in, but like there is not a homophobic movement within this setting. Like it's considered normal, I think. Or at least later on when we get more Renette, there's never a moment. I don't think there's ever a moment when anyone's like, oh, she has to hide the fact that she's lesbian. It's just
okay.
Yeah, we've got a few more points here, and we've got 10 minutes.
Really quickly, just finishing up the kind of representation thing. A lot of people, and pretty understandably, look at Steris and are like, and think of her as like autistic representation or as representation someone with Asperger's. This is something that is explicitly confirmed. I found an interview where someone had asked, Steris seems to have something like Asperger's. Did you do that on purpose? Brandon Sanderson says yes, and that he was in particular drawing from like people in his life that have Asperger's. And was like very intentionally trying to do like an accurate and respectful depiction of Asperger's in Steris.
Which I don't think there's enough Steris here to really sort of get into that fully. And also, I would say that if you're looking for autistic characters, I would point to Marasi and Renette before I would point to Steris. Because, like, maybe with the explicit, like, creation of a contract for, like, a marriage and, like, her having sort of, like, social foibles and that sort of thing.
It's like her relying on rules and structure rather than, like, I guess, like just being able to understand people. She's like, instead of that, I'm just going to rely on the rules.
Yeah, but, like, all three of our, like, female leads are kind of weirdos with special interests who don't want to talk or won't shut up about them. And, like, all of that reads as autistic to me. And, like, to varying degrees. But, I don't know, I would say that, like, that sort of writing of it is stronger to me than what we get with Steris. But then again, I am not artistic, so...
Yeah. There's something to be said, though, that, like, these women know their audience, or at least Marasi knows her audience, and thinks that she stays quiet because she doesn't think Wax or Wayne care about what she has to say.
Or she's been told that, and, like, once she's allowed to be a little bit on her own, like, she doesn't shut up, and I actually really like that about her.
Yeah.
No, I do generally like Marasi as a character. I think she's charming. I like it when she's like on the page and doing stuff. One quick note, I don't really know how to work this into any of the other topics. Once again, we have another arranged marriage in a Sanderson book. Like, this is also a book where he neatly avoids there being the whole like massive age gap romance. This book like sets up that Marasi is really into Wax, and there are definitely some books that point to like it might be a romance, but then like it ends up being like no, like they're not gonna start dating. And a big part of that is Wax just being like, she's half my age. No.
Yeah.
And literally, because I think it said that she's not like her final year, but like she's either in her final year of university or her junior year
something
of
like
university.
Along those lines.
So she's like 2021 at most.
And Wax is in his 40s.
He's 42 explicitly.
Oh, whoa. She's becoming a lawyer. She's like an attorney at the end. I think she's probably older.
No, she's becoming
like
a criminologist.
25. I was confused because in the epilogue she's like, this is my first case as an attorney.
I think it does say that, yeah.
Yeah, so she's in law school.
The standards are just lower back then.
Well, I mean, that could be true. It was like at a certain time period, it was easier to be a...
Anyways, I imagined her as like 24, 25.
I think I like this part mostly because I was expecting it to be done worse. Because what I was half remembering from the first time I read this was what I thought happened was Wax is into Marasi, but then has to be like, no, but I can't. But actually, kind of from the beginning, he's like, oh, if I was 20 years young, like she's exactly my type if I was 20 years younger.
Yeah.
But like otherwise, it's like he never actually has a genuine like, I'm like romantically interested in this woman. It's just like an acknowledgement that like she would have been my exact type if I was like younger.
Jack, I'm going to put a minute on the clock. You have a minute to get through your physics point.
Oh shit. Okay. The basic thing is two things. One, Sanderson has explicitly acknowledged that the speed bubbles just break all kinds of physics, and he just has to go, a wizard did it. Because if the speed bubbles work the way they said it does, like you put up a speed bubble, congrats, you just microwaved everybody in a 50-foot radius. There's a lot of stuff with light and dilation, all that stuff that I can't really get into, but speed bubbles are an example where he actually tried really hard. Like apparently he talked to a lot of physicists, did this whole thing to try and make it work, and literally just could not make it work without just saying it just works. The momentum thing, more than once in this book, he makes a point where he's like, things of the same weight fall at the same speed, so Wax changing his mass mid-flight doesn't change his speed. That's not how that fucking works. Things of different mass have negligibly different accelerations in falling. But like if you were moving at a speed and your weight suddenly changed, your speed would change. Because unless the magic just breaks conservation of momentum, and this is such a big thing that bothers me so much, where it's like, and one, it would be cooler if it was more physically accurate. It would be more cooler. Imagine if he was doing cool acrobatics where he increases his weight to intentionally slow down and like do weird acrobatics or suddenly speed up by lowering his weight. It'd be so much cooler. And also, he knows this is wrong because in a later book, and it's not a big spoiler, but in a later book, a character explicitly to the audience explains why actually the magic works, because later he must have realized that he got this shit wrong, but he retcons it in.
Okay, time.
Anyway, it would have been cooler if it was more physically accurate. Anyway,
that's very fair.
There were such lengthy like physics explanations in some parts of this, and I was like, dude, he's just shooting through the ceiling. I do not give a fuck that he's like making his weight so like I don't care. Just let him shoot through the ceiling. Like, okay, he's a little heavier now. Like, okay.
I thought most of that was fine, but I can understand how like it does get a little repetitious. Where I was like, all right.
It's like he doesn't trust you to get what he's trying to say.
Okay, who's next on the timer?
What point do you want to make?
I want to make my prediction.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we have enough time to do your predictions, because normally that's a 10-minute segment, and I want it to be a 10-minute segment. I don't want it to be a 3-minute segment.
Yeah.
Of the things that we have, I think the only thing that we can genuinely do in 3 minutes is the literal Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, yeah. Throughout the book, Wax prays to Harmony and gets kind of vague impressions of like, you're on the right path. Keep doing it. Go you, or whatever. And then during the last fight scene, he prays, like he's like losing, like things are going bad. Mm-hmm. And he prays again, and Harmony literally speaks to him this time, and it's like in a kind of like it's like meant to be in a kind of bantery, fun way, like, "Hey, God here, what's up?"
This made me like, so angry.
And then God is like, "I can't help you too directly. I can only do little nudges." And it turns out that little nudge is, and this is like Wax, like he doesn't have a gun anymore. He's pinned down. He's wounded. All that stuff. And then it turns out that little nudge is God made it so that Wax's old guns he gave up at the start of the book just like fell in front of him.
And like the implication is that the group stole them, and Sazed has just put them there, like made them more apparent to Wax, but it still sucks.
It would have been so much cooler if God didn't do that. If he just found them.
If he just found them.
It would have been a cooler moment.
It would have been a cooler moment. And the idea to me that Sazed, Harmony, the hero of ages, has decided to do with his time as a divine power, help out cops, like hunt down a criminal, is so deeply upsetting to me. Especially since
apparently one of the big reason Harmony doesn't take a more active effort is because he's a big believer in free will and a light touch. Like, says it is like light touch free will. But then when he decides to do a little firmer of a touch, it's here's a gun, shoot that man. Like,
Also, that's crazy that he thinks he has a light touch. Homeboy is so like micromanaging that he literally dropped off his own book. Sir,
Yeah.
there's no light touch here.
The other thing that bothers me about this in particular is we're doing hemalurgic earrings again. Wax says he got his earring from like God himself, like a divine touch from God himself.
like a missionary that he suspects was probably one of their mythical like agents of God.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna call. I bet that's a Khandra. And like that's the thing that makes most sense because again, Sazed's communicating via hemalurgy, so it's probably someone with a spike. So it's either going to be a Khandra or someone like Marsh, who's an Inquisitor.
Anyway, we're at 1
Okay.
o'clock, so we have to stop now. I did put basically what happened in the last fight scene into our chat.
Yes, go do a crime.
I think we're gonna now like break, and we're probably gonna come back to record for another like 30 minutes or something.
Yeah,
For some
Yeah.
last thoughts.
I'm apologizing for this being in 2 segments. My medicine fucked me up today.
That's okay.
The last thing I say before we stop recording is, Taylor, I want your thoughts on the city being named after Elend.
I've got hateful thoughts. That's pretty much
I got
it.
hateful thoughts.
Okay,
Let's
I'm
stop
stopping.
the recording. Hello, everyone. We're back. Last time when we left off, we were talking specifically about Jack's physics degree, and we also talked about the literal Deus Ex Machina. And since we were talking about the literal Deus Ex Machina, I think it'd be good to talk about Marsh first.
I mean, what is there? I guess my question is, what is there to talk? I'm sure there's plenty to talk about Marsh, but Marsh had such a short, like, very Avengers end credit scene.
Yeah, I guess my question really about Marsh was just like, is Marsh like this paladin of Sazed now? And like, does that mean he's a good guy? Or like, why is hemalurgy like a bad thing?
My understanding is that like in this first book, no one talks about hemalurgy, and I think my suspicion of what the takeaway is that hemalurgy is not like a well-known thing. It's kind of like a secret. Like they have the earrings, but they're not like understanding those earrings like as hemalurgy. They're just being like, yeah, you put in Harmony's earring and you can listen to him, or you can pray to him.
I also have a theory about those earrings. Like, we know that all the Steel Inquisitors besides Marsh are dead at the end of the books, but those spikes are probably still around, so they're probably repurposed. And they're just like, they're probably recycling.
Interesting.
And a thing to remember from the last books is that like anybody spiked could be controlled by Ruin, or like has a direct line to Ruin, which is now part of Harmony. So it's probably just a thing where like Marsh is still alive and he's so spiked up that he has like a constant direct line to Sazed now.
Yeah.
Sure, but also the other half of it was that Allomancers were connected to preservation. So, what about that?
At least we didn't see it last book, not in any kind of way, like in a connected in a sense that like allomancy comes from preservation, not in a sense that like preservation had some kind of like, you know, speed dial hotline into their brains, like with hemalurgy.
Maybe I'm forgetting my lore, but they didn't have the mists were the speed dial
Yeah.
from preservation, which
Oh,
the mists are still here. And like you couldn't like preservation couldn't talk to its followers because Ruin forced it not to. Like that was a part of the balance.
Another thing is that hemalurgy lets Ruin control, like just not just talk to, but like control, like take overrule their free will, etc. if they wanted to. And it seems like basically Sazed is just choosing not to do that, but
Yeah.
still like I think it is basically Marsh is Sazed's paladin going around doing, you know, they're old pals, and Marsh is like the guy on the ground going around doing stuff. What that stuff is, I don't know.
I also just think that this is some of Sanderson's strongest imagery and character work, and also, like, with his religious work, just the fact that everyone refers to Marsh as death with nails in his eyes. It's good. It's very good imagery.
Yeah, you say that hemalurgy is like not really a known thing, but I mean, come on. if there's a guy in very popular mythology who has like iron eyes, someone's gonna get curious. But maybe it's not mainstream.
Add that to the predictions.
Yeah, honestly, I think that is a good prediction because I think that Marsh certainly, like, I think people think of Marsh as a religious figure, but something tells me that the villains of, like, this quadrology are still probably going to be hemalurgists on some level. They're probably just going to try and figure out a way to make it separate from Sazed and Harmony, and who knows if it'll work.
I mean, I kind of thought that a part of why Miles was going so crazy was because he had impaled himself with so much gold. It was back to, like, the hemalurgy and, like, is there a part of hemalurgy that makes you crazy?
Yeah, I think that's a thing, because hemalurgy, even though, like, the god behind hemalurgy now is not, like, an evil god like Ruin.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that a part of hemalurgy is you have to steal it from...
You gotta kill someone to do
like,
it.
where are these earrings coming from then? Yeah, you're right. So true. Like, they're probably repurposed.
I'm 90% sure that it has to be Steel Inquisitor recycling, because I can't think of another way that Sazed would allow these to exist.
That's the thing. It's like the magic is now being controlled by, you know, like a good guy, like a good god, but like one of the key parts to make the magic work is murder. So
yeah, and the way I kind of read it too is that, like, I thought that because ruin and preservation are connected to allomancy and hemalurgy, that, like, Sazed could maybe only have a direct connection with people who are both using hemalurgy and allomancy, and maybe even because Sazed was a feruchemist, like, maybe there's, like, a very specific combination of people he can talk to, and our specialist boy was able to... I mean, yeah, I think that... I have my theories.
I also just think that it's a good way to bring back a character people like that didn't die at the end of the trilogy. Before we get to Taylor's prediction, one other thing that I want to say about Marsh in this book is Marsh says, oh, there's a reason I didn't talk to Wax, because he'd probably try to shoot me for answers, which, like, is a good thing to do when you encounter an avatar of God. That's funny. Wax does my brother's work, meaning Wax does Kelsier's work. And I'd like to point out that's not true. Wax does Ellen's work. Wax does Ellen's work. And
no, that's what I'm saying. That's part of my prediction.
Okay.
All right. Do we just because we're tight on time? Do we want to jump to Taylor's predictions?
Yes.
I called this after reading just the prologue. I, like, finished the prologue and I read, like, a little bit of chapter 1, and then I started thinking about the prologue and I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so in the prologue, we have Bloody Tan. He is a...
serial killer.
Yes, he's a serial killer, but he's also the person who readies dead bodies. He's a doctor.
Mortician.
He's a mortician, yes. And so part of his serial killing is that he, like, set up dead bodies and, like, mummified them onto the walls. There's, like, this horrible section where we're walking through with Wax these, like, dead bodies on the wall, and then we come up to where Tan is, you know, Wax thinks Tan is talking to him, but it turns out he's actually talking to Lessie, but he knows that Wax is there. And at the end, he starts going off about the gods, and, you know, he says he's seen death himself with nails in his eyes. I've seen the survivor who is life. And he's like, I know I'm a puppet. We all are. Which I thought was, like, which I already thought was a very raw place to start, because I was like, yes, like, what I got from the end of Hero of Ages is, like, that's exactly what was happening. But then it keeps going, and his last line in the prologue is, after he pulls Lessie's head back and Wax shoots her and she dies, he says the best performances are those that can only be performed once. And then he dies. And so Wax had walked through his little performance of these bodies, but we had found out he was actually talking to Lessie about the performance. And so he had brought Lessie through the dead bodies, and then Wax walked through the dead bodies again. And then he said, you know, he shoots her, and then the best performances can only happen once. And then something again that can only happen once, Wax shooting him, happens again. Basically, the performance is happening twice. And so my big putting this all together is that the performance of, the hero of ages is setting up to happen again. The best performances can only happen once. That's not true. These performances happened twice, 2 different times in the prologue. And I think that's my guess. And as I've walked through this, I'd also like to even further go on and say that I think that Wax has a connection to Vin. And I think that him and Vin are like somehow going to end up being like divinely connected. I don't know. But that's my guess.
I did not make that connection of like the whole best performance is only done once, but like actually that performance just happened twice. I did not make that connection. That's super cool.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if he's talking about death, like, death can only happen once. Like, 2 people died that day.
That's really, really interesting. No, that's super cool. And yeah, the puppetry theme is definitely there. And we were just talking about like hemalurgy and spikes and how that like, gives God the ability to control you, even though it seems like he's choosing not to. But that's just him choosing not to. That's not he can't.
I think that he's setting up that the end of this quadrology is going to be a big godly back to the performance that had already happened before is happening again.
Like another person ascends to be God, another...
I don't know what exactly the performance is, but I think something on that scale is like setting up to happen.
Interesting.
The performance is going to happen again. I think and I think that Wax is going to be Vin in all of this. Mm-hmm. Which is funny that you said that Wax is doing Ellen's work, because that's what Vin did. All of Ellen's work.
In the city of Ellendale, our favorite character from the Mistborn Era 1, we're in a city named after him. You're going to have the thing I was laughing about when we started this book was we have been ranting and raving about how much we hate Ellen so much, and this entire next quadrology we're going to have to spend in a city named after him. We're not escaping him, basically. Like, we're going to have to see his name repeatedly.
I just like that he's not like a super mythical figure. I think that he's like, I don't mind that he's just like the city name, because I don't have to think about him that much. But if people like had a religion around him, I'd probably get annoyed.
Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, because like the religions around, like, what are the religions we know? There's survivorism, which is around Kelsier.
And then we can go over it briefly. There's sliverism, there's trellism, there's a couple more.
Trellism is kind of framed as like a sort of not like super popular one, like a offshoot. Mm-hmm. Or being a survivorist, I think is how it's said. That I feel like is treated as like the dominant one, is like kind of like mm-hmm. the big church.
Yeah.
Pathism is like, what Wax does, which is, you put in your earring and you talk to Harmony and he gives you guns to go murder poor people with.
Yeah, of course.
We have a bunch of end of episode stuff we've got to do.
Hoyd is a random beggar at the wedding. It's also worth knowing that the wedding that they attend, the 2 people getting married are named for the founders of Brandon Sanderson's forums, Michelle and Josh.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Are they married in real life?
I don't believe they are married in real life, but I would have to double check that. But they get married in the novel.
Brandon Sanderson ships you. He's shipping you guys.
They get married in the novel. I think they're married in real life. I would have to double check. But Hoyd is talking to them, and now there's a bunch of theories that the characters and the real people from 17th Shard are both world harpers. So that's fun.
Hoyd, it's very much Hoyd has nothing to do in this book other than just like a random one-off, like.
And you know what? That's how it should be.
Well, it's back to classic form. It's back to like OG, like how Hoyd is done.
Taylor, what are your rankings?
I put this below Way of Kings and Mistborn, but above Elantris. Obviously, there's a lot of like that's just like where it is, kind of vaguely on my list. It's number 6 right now.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing rankings overall? I thought we were doing just rankings for this year.
This year, it's the best one.
Yeah, this year it's the best one.
That's at the hard.
For me, it's the lowest of the Cosmere apart from Will of Ascension, I think.
It's definitely low, but it's not low because I actively disliked it. It's low because it's just like, yeah, it's setting up a series I kind of like. It's a kind of lackluster setup to a series that I will ultimately end up liking. at least the first time I read it. So it's definitely above Well of Ascension. It's definitely it's below Way of Kings. Actually, it's a weird thing. I think if you asked me a long time ago before we were doing this podcast, I would have ranked it above Elantris and Warbreaker, but that's because I hadn't reread those books in a really long time. And now having reread them and gone through this discussion, I retroactively like Elantris and Warbreaker a lot more now than I did after the first time I read them. So I might put it below Elantris and Warbreaker as well, and then, but not as like an indictment to this. Putting it next to Well of Ascension feels bad, because Well of Ascension is like deep at the bottom.
For the record, if this book was as good as its first third and like it really delivered all the way throughout, this would be like on par with Hero of Ages for me. I really enjoyed the first third of this book, and then just felt let down. Ugh.
We are reading The 11th Metal and Heuristic Algorithm and Reasoning Response Engine, shortened to HARE, H-A-R-R-E.
Another short story.
2 short stories.
If you're following along in like what books to buy, what you should buy for the next episode is Arcanum Unbounded, which will collect all of Sanderson's Cosmere short stories, which will prove useful in the coming year because we're reading a fuckload of them.
Next episode will be probably very similar to the Infinity Blade episode. I don't know how long HARE is, but like 11th Metal is really short. Not as short as like I Hate Dragons, but it's short.
It'll be nice to have an easy month.
Yeah, I agree. And then the month after that is another 2 short stories, The Emperor's Soul and Legion.
Those are novellas, though.
That month I'm really excited for because I'm so excited for Emperor's Soul. I love it so much.
And we may have a special guest for Emperor's Soul. We still have to confirm with them, but I'm excited about that. Anyway, we are at our time limit, so thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back next month for the 11th Metal and H.A.R.R.E. Until then, grab a book and hit the beach.
Grab a book and hit the beach.
A Grain of Sanderson is created by Graham Gilman, Taylor Lane, and Jack McLaughlin. I edit and produce the show. Our logo is by our very talented friend Ven Busby. Our theme music is Goodnight Kiss by Too Mellow off the album Midnight Broadcasts. You can find their work at twomellow.net, that's the number 2, M-E-L-L-O, and Too Mellow Makes at bandcamp.com. If you'd like to support the Beachcombers further, you can do that in the following ways. First, please tell your friends about this podcast. Sharing the pod in a Discord, writing a thoughtful post on social media, or otherwise telling your friends really helps us out. You can also support us by following us on social media. Taylor works very hard on our Instagram. Or by buying a book from our bookshop, of which we see a small cut. Both those links are in the episode description. Questions, critiques, encouragement? Please write us an email at agrainofsanderson@gmail.com. Or join our Discord. A link is available in our show notes. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, Graham, this isn't really like, might not be great for the podcast, so I'm just going to say it now. But like, I had a thought about what you were saying about the whole, like, no one was holding a gun to Sanderson's head and forcing him to include the kidnapping thing. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me, why is my camera so blurry? That was reminding me of like conversations I've had with like Kathleen and Ven about like D&D world building and stuff, which is just like the fact that like, yeah, in my D&D world, I generally don't have like misogyny or sexual assault be like a huge big like thing, even though quote unquote realistically, like it could exist like realistically. So I think that's just an example of like, yeah, you're right. Like, even if you set up a world where that kind of stuff would happen, you also can it's a fantasy world. You can also just not have it.
Pivot
once
to something
again,
else.
Yeah, I'll put this at the end. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to the Range Touch folks, not just for Just King Things, but specifically for Homestuck Made This World, their other podcast, because one of the things that I admire all the time is when they're reading through Homestuck and like criticizing it and stuff like that, they will often stop, take a huge break, and go, we have to remember that this is all shit that Andrew Hussey just made up in their head. Like, no one was forcing the book to be this way, the work to be this way. Anyway.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I needed to bring up to you. Let me read you what you have written. When is genre an excuse of misogyny? Some pretty misogynistic things are said by pretty much every character. Wax has some chauvinism, is what you have written.
Is it? Oh, isn't it like chauvinism instead?
Chauvinism is the word.
Chauvinism.
Chauvinism is an ideology of restoring the Japanese imperial throne.
Yes, I thought it was chauvinism because I was looking at that like that doesn't look right, and I don't know what, but I didn't know what it was supposed to be. Like I didn't know what the word was even supposed to be.
You know what? It's fine. Anyway, add Craig to the goddamn recording.